Oh, damn, my mic just went to my sandwich.
Know how to know your army? It's the Magic Podcast for the Average Planeswalker. Sweet.
What's up, everybody? This is Average Planeswalker. I'm here with my homie Paul, also known as Oliver Pimpin, by his stage name.
What's up, y'all?
So Paul's a good friend of mine, and we've been playing Magic for quite some time together. So, we decided to finally do a podcast that we've been talking about for like 7 years?
Forever. Oh, no, it's way longer than that.
Is it?
Yeah, before podcasts were a thing, we wanted to post YouTubes.
The YouTube videos.
The YouTubes.
Yeah. So anyway, him and I focus mainly on Standard, but we do dip into a lot of the other formats. So our knowledge is pretty vast with our powers combined. That's what I should say.
We are Captain Planet.
So yeah, we wanted to put our thoughts to video because we talk about Magic all the time, right? Like all the damn time about so many different things.
Yeah, 3 or 4 days a week.
Yeah, and it's always a different topic. It's not always just Standard, but we do have the most conversations about Standard, to be honest.
Yeah, but I think it's a little more than that, right? Because, like, Standard is our passion. That's what we're into. That's what we like and enjoy and play. But a lot of the topics that we cover don't just apply to Standard, right? So, like, sometimes we talk about the Standard meta and key cards in that meta, but a lot of our conversations involve play style or some of the fringe cards that are not just applicable to Standard, but also have, key card play abilities or archetypes or mechanics in other metas. And so a lot of the stuff we talk about isn't just about what Standard is, but Magic in general, right? So like different play styles, archetypes, strategies. And I was just having a conversation yesterday with a couple other friends of ours, that aren't just Standard related. You can apply those to, now we've got Pioneer and of course Modern and Commander, even as much as you and I talk about Commander in whatever way, but also Legacy and Vintage.
Yeah, like the whole EDH/Commander thing could be in its entirety different podcast.
Dude, we could do a whole podcast because, you and I were playing Elder Dragon Highlander before anybody knew what it was.
That's what
right?
I'm saying. I
Before
tell so many people
ever left the border.
Yeah, like I know
Yeah.
you guys were definitely playing it far longer than I was, but then I jumped into
not that much longer.
Oh, I thought
maybe
it was.
a few months.
Yeah.
Oh no, it was maybe a few months.
Because I got to y'all. Henry invited me. Shout out to Henry. He invited me to his garage, and that was like right when I got. Yeah. And that was right when I got stationed there. And so
that was right when it was getting big in the state. That was well before it ever left the state, before Homeboy moved out of state, took it with him.
That was 2011. Because when I joined the Army was 2010. So I got stationed there.
Oh, wow.
It was 2011, yeah. So it was because I got there January 3rd, 2011. So it was probably like within a few weeks, maybe a month. So by February, I was
winter 10-11.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, snap. Wait, so we've been homies for like 10, 12 years?
Mm-hmm.
Damn.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
I know, right?
Man.
Henry and I were talking about it the other day, how long I've almost known him half of my life.
Yeah, I was going to say, because you were there longer than I was. Yeah, for sure.
Well, about 4 years longer.
Yeah. But, so anyway, that's what we do off streams, off podcasts, and everything like that. So we're finally doing this whole podcast thing, which is awesome. I'm pretty stoked about it. And I think it was inevitable. for us to do this.
Inevitable.
It was inevitable. uh,
Inevitable.
it was just about time because there's so much happening in Magic right now. Like a
Yep.
ridiculous amount of things that are happening in Magic, and being able to discuss it with another person is really great. But being able to record it and then share it with everybody else in the community, even like my channel is not the biggest thing by any means, but I do have a few people on here who seem to enjoy it. So I think having our type of conversations is really good for them to hear as well. Um, I did write down a list that I sent you of topics that we can discuss.
Yep.
Was there anything in
hmm
particular that you had in mind that you wanted to either start with or you wanted to make sure we talked about?
I think probably if I were to pick from the topics you sent, so I made notes on all of them. But I
Okay.
think
I
of
mean,
the topics that you sent, state of standard after the bans is a big one to me because I think it's a super important.
so I think we could
And
start with
then
that.
okay, yeah, absolutely.
But and then I just wanted to point that out. I think we could just start with that. But what was the next one you were gonna say? Sorry.
And I think just kind of a piece of that is kind of a segue, not really a separate topic, is the top 5 cards of standard.
Mm-hmm.
And then I wanted to talk about definitely for sure brewing versus net decking. Um,
Mm.
and then at the end, if we want to talk about like what I would like to see from Magic in general, right? But
Okay.
some of these things will segue into a couple of the other topics real
Sure.
briefly, and I've just got some talking points, right?
Yeah, and that's how all of our conversations go anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Like we end up down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, let's see. One thing that's really, really cool too, I would love to do is if we can be consistent on this, I'd love to get some of the other homies from up there to join in also with us,
Oh,
you know?
absolutely.
Oh, that'd be so
Yeah,
awesome.
absolutely.
Because we
That'd
do
be
have a
great. And
very
I,
we have a really diverse group of Magic players up there, and
oh yeah,
and a lot of good players too. So, and each one of them I think can bring something to the table, which would be fun.
yeah, absolutely.
So,
Yeah, it'd just be like when we used to kitchen table all the time, we just
right? Yeah.
same conversations,
Hmm.
just same dynamic. Let's get it going, man. I'm down.
There's like I keep telling the story of when we would play 6 to 8 to like 10 man pods. Like that
Oh
was
yeah.
the norm in the garage, you know?
Yeah.
Everybody would just drop
Yeah,
in and
the
play. It
garage
wasn't
had
this like
kitchen table commander.
yeah, and it
Oh, and I
wasn't just
love your
pods of
reference
full.
in your YouTube video to Cheaty Face. That was so fun, dude. Like that
Dude,
was the
wasn't that
dynamic of
hilarious?
Commander. It was so funny, dude. We
That was
still laugh about it
hilarious.
today, 12
Yes.
years later,
Yes.
It's so fucking cool.
Yeah, I mean, I don't hear stories like that, you know. Because I've made
Mm-mm.
I'm being in Japan, man. EDH is not that poppin'. It competitively, it is
Really?
not poppin'. Not at all.
Mm.
You got
Interesting.
Pioneer, Standard, Modern, Legacy, and I'd have to say Pio and Modern are the two biggest formats being played right now
Mm.
over here.
Okay.
But the casual side, which is odd to say casual, um, the casual side of EDH in Japan is very competitive. So
Hmm.
non tournament wise, when they play quote casually just with friends, it's very high competitive. So
Really?
yeah,
Okay.
but when they have an EDH tournament, nobody goes in, and it's just weird.
Hmm.
I don't know what that is. I don't know what that's about. But yeah,
Yeah,
it's
that
just
is weird because like it's kind of the opposite over here, right? Like when we sit down with casual, we're like, let's just play something fun.
yeah.
And then when we go into the tournament, it's like you're seeing all the
Fun
CEDH,
is out
right?
the
Like it's
window.
just people. Yeah, fun is out the window. It's about the turn 2 win,
Yeah, I'm here to beat
It's
your
like
ass.
Urza decks everywhere and turn 3 combo decks. Everybody loses at the same time. Like we are totally the opposite.
But anyway, that's another commander topic. One of these days we'll have a whole commander
Oh yeah,
topic and everything. So,
we
all
should.
right.
We should. We absolutely should.
So let's hit it. Let's hit it hard. Let's hit it good. Standard. The state of standard after the bans. So recently we had bannings, which I believe were completely valid, with the exception of I think one or two. So I'm gonna try to remember what exactly they were.
So we had
You
Reckoner
you can see my
Bankbuster,
you can see my screen, right?
Invoke Despair. Yep. So Reckoner
Okay.
Bankbuster, Invoke Despair, and Fable of the Mirror Breaker.
All right, we got Bank, Fable, Boo.
Rogue Despair.
All right, so these were the bans from the latest banning for standard. I know it's red, but I'll highlight over them, but just to kind of keep them here. Um, so, oh, excuse me. What are your thoughts on these? I know I put up a video about mine, but the viewers haven't heard your opinions on them and everything. I know we've had major discussions on this.
Yeah, so we'll address the elephant in the room first, right? What's the first thing you notice about all three of these cards?
Excuse me, I'm eating. They all go in Rakdos. I hate that deck. Or Grixis.
Okay, all right. So they do all go on Ragnos, but the big thing is, right? They're all from the same set. It's really weird, right? And so we look at that and we're like, oh my goodness. Okay, well, so first of all, Neon Dynasty was a great set. It was great in limited, it was great in standard, and some of these cards, especially like Fable of the Mirror Breaker, have started seeing play in a lot of extended formats too, right? Because it's just that efficient. It's that good. And so I think that's something we have to recognize, right? So Wizards did a really good job with that set. Now, I didn't play it a lot in limited. It was kind of wild and all over the place and limited, but what that meant was it was very diverse, right? So depending on what you drafted or what you pulled in your sealed pool, you could do a lot of different things with it. Now, everybody knows Invoke Despair was a problem. You and I talked about it months ago. You called it out in your Wish I Could Ban Cards video like 8 months ago, probably, right? Like, it was a problem. Yeah, and if we look at what Wizards release notes, I agree with everything they said about this card. It did too much for what it was worth, and you said that months ago. But the other thing was that it gave black as a color the ability to deal with things that it traditionally struggles with, right? So planeswalkers and enchantments. Yeah. And I remember when Feed the Swarm came out, right?
This is old heads talking now. When you say, I remember.
yeah. I remember when Feed the Swarm came out, I was like, holy crap, black has a 2-mana answer for enchantments. Like, that's a big deal, right? But it had a downside. The downside was you lose life equal to its mana value. Well, now we have Invoke Despair, and everybody's like, well, it's not going to be a problem because it's 4 black mana. That's really hard to do. Here's the problem, right? And this is, me talking, is we have the best mana base in Standard that we have had in 10 years, right? Between the Triomes, the Check lands, the Pain lands, and the Tap lands, there's no problem casting this in some decks on turn 4 and on some decks turn 5. So just being able to curve out and... Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. I want to just kind of piggyback off that. I 100% agree with you, and I want to take it a step further. That I believe we are currently in a standard format, where we have had the best mana base ever in the history of, what is this, Type 2 is what it used to be called, Standard. So I think we are currently, even if you look back to when we had fetch lands with shock lands, it doesn't compare. I honestly do not think it compares by any means, because the Triome lands, even though they come in tapped, with this card in particular, Invoke Despair, you don't care if it comes in tapped in turn 1, 2, 3, 4. It's turn 5 is where you're wanting it, or unless you're ramping, then obviously turn 4 because of treasures and things like that. So I just wanted to mention that I think we're sitting in currently the best time of mana based ever in the history of the game for this format, and I honestly don't think it would ever get this good again for these reasons. For these exact reasons.
Well, and prime example, last November, I won the standard RCQ for Alaska, right? And I didn't run any 1-drops in my deck at all. I had 3 different cards, so 12 cards in the 2-drop. I did not run cut downs. I did not run lay down the arms, like none of that.
Oh, straight up 1-drops.
I had straight up 1-drop spells because the mana base was so good that I knew I was consistently going to be playing a tap land on turn 1, right? And so I just tweaked my deck so that I was playing either a check land or a Triome on turn 1, and it was totally fine. It helped curve out my mulligans, right? So like I didn't have to mulligan as much because I didn't need that untapped land on turn one, and that's a big deal, right? Because
Yep.
when the top end of my deck is going into Invoke Despair, who cares about turn one?
Yeah.
Because turn two, I'm dropping a either a removal spell or a Bloodthirst Harvester, and then turn four I'm dropping Shielder. Turn five I'm going into Invoke Despair. So I don't really care about turn one. You can do
Yeah.
whatever you want because I'm going to consistently drop Invoke Despair on turn four or turn
Right.
five.
Right. No, that
So it
makes
wasn't
sense.
that big
And
of a deal. So this,
I think another big thing that you just mentioned right there is that this card, the consistency of this card was too damn good because you just stated right there, you turn one tap land, don't care. Turn two, Blood Tith Harvester.
yep,
Turn three was what again? Fable, right?
sure, maybe
Uh,
if I had it,
Maybe
or
if
I
you
just
had
hold
it,
up for a removal spell.
hold up for removal, right? You had two options that are 100% valid on either end. Because if you Fable,
Hmm.
you get Invoke a turn earlier. Like, why not?
Yeah,
You know? And then
easy.
by turn four, you play the Shieldred, and then by turn five, you're the curve is just ridiculous because I remember Mono Black was playing that one drop Phyrexian guy that leveled up, but we don't see him anymore
Hmm.
because of the fact of what you just said and the fact that everybody's okay with just a turn one tap land because it's going to set up the
Yeah.
rest of the game. It's like turn
Yep.
one tap land is your engine at this point.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And so, as you pointed out, Fable of the Mirror Breaker into literally anything, hold up mana, and then discard and draw into an Invoke Despair. Like, that's really backbreaking for the opponent, and it was
Yeah.
really unhealthy. So I agree with Watsy in that banning. Fable of the Mirror Breaker, if we look at that card, I don't think,
Well, before we go on to
this is my
Fable,
opinion.
sorry, before we go
Okay.
on to Fable, I want to say a couple other things on each of these cards as well. So for me, the thing, and I know I've beaten this dead horse about Invoke Despair, and I'm gonna keep beating the crap out of it because Watson needs to understand like this was a huge mistake. This card was one of the biggest mistakes they've made in Standard in a very long time, to be honest. I understand that they
Agreed.
wanted these invokes for each color, but
Yep.
none of the other invokes come close to the value that this card gives for the
Correct. Well, and I
investment.
think
They
you and
wanted
I
to.
have talked about it before.
Mhm.
If Invoke Despair was May, if target opponent may sacrifice a creature,
True.
and then for each one it was a May ability, right? It means I can choose to lose the life and keep my powerhouse planeswalker or enchantment on the board. It
Correct.
wasn't a May, it was a must. If you have
Yeah.
one, you have to. And
Yes.
so I think that was the mistake that Wizards made with that card. And I get it, they didn't really play it out, and they don't have the playtest group. I know last week I was talking to Forner,
Mhm.
and one of the things that he talked about was, once Wizards did away with their playtest group, they kind of lost track of R&D because
Yeah.
R&D would come up with card ideas, and then the playtest group would break them. And they go, okay, this is really unhealthy.
Yeah.
But once they did away with that, right? So
And that's
whatever.
huge. That's a huge blow to the game and to the player
Yeah.
base. Like it's the thing that Watsy forgets, or I shouldn't say forgets. They know. They don't care that this is a game first. It's turned into a
Yes.
collectible card game. You know.
Correct.
Um. So, but in that aspect, that's a whole corporate thing we can discuss about for another time. But coming back to Invoke is that just like you said, having the May, I wouldn't feel so bad about it
Me
because
either.
when you have a creature and a walker and an enchantment prior to this card, you knew there was a chance of losing one of those. At a very rare chance, two of those permanents that you had on the board. There was
Yeah.
never a thought in your mind that they could remove all three because there was nothing that could do
Correct.
that. And so
Right.
back in the day before this card came out, and by back in the day I just mean before this release of this card, there was not
Yeah.
that fear.
No.
And you can see right now in the standard format, we're seeing planeswalkers again, which we didn't see for almost 2 seasons, maybe even 3 seasons because of this card. And I love planeswalkers. I'm glad to see planeswalkers again. Yeah, they're whooping my ass, but I mean, I'm glad to see them in the format again, to be honest,
Right.
you know? Um but the biggest thing that I noticed about this card is the gain that the player gets from playing this card was far too much to the
Yeah.
there was no fairness to this card. And I remember there was an interview with I don't remember the dude's name from WotC who always did, he's the face of the Magic area when they do their pre-releases
Yep.
and thing, or not pre, anyway, that dude.
Hmm.
He said that they wanted to push this set like power wise and see where they can be and
Yeah.
where they can go. And I
Yeah.
think that you can't do that, or that what that tells me is you didn't learn from Throne of Eldraine. That's what that tells me.
Yep.
Because you
100%.
guys pushed Eldraine through the roof for green and blue, and now black and red is being pushed like no other. And
Yeah.
so now,
Well, and I've
now
said
at this,
it.
I mean, it's ridiculous at this point. Which color combo is going to be pushed next? Hopefully, it's blue white. I'm not gonna
Yeah.
lie to you.
Well, and I've said several times, when we enter a meta where Phyrexian Obliterator is no longer a game-stopping powerhouse,
Right?
power creep is a problem, right?
Right?
Because you remember Scars of Mirrodin block set like Phyrexian Obliterator, he was a problem. If
Yeah.
somebody played a Phyrexian Obliterator, it was a problem,
Yeah.
right? And
Oh,
so I think that really. So let's talk about Obliterator for a second, okay?
sure.
Right? And so, like, I'm going to put Obliterator in the same category as Shieldred, right? So, like, Shieldred is, in my opinion, fair and balanced in the current meta. Okay, so the Aftermath. Shieldred the Aftermath, or the Apocalypse, right? Yeah, Apocalypse. So, she's a problem. But I don't ever really worry about Shieldred too much because, one, I play her, and two, if my opponent plays her, there's a lot of premium removal out there, and I think that's an important thing for people to remember.
Yeah.
When we look at like Fateful Absence or Go for the Throat or Grasp, right? Like it's just so easy to get rid of her. And then if you look in like the mono white, which is in the tier 1, tier 2 meta right now, they've got Lay Down Arms. Well, Lay Down Arms can get rid of her, so you lose 2 life at the beginning of your turn, and then you lay down arms and you get rid of Children. So she's a powerful card. That's why she's $61 for a pack rare. But she can
Is
be
she
dealt
that
with,
high right
and there's a
now?
lot. Yeah, pack rare comes out at $60. Yep, because it's a
Oh.
good card, and she's seeing play in extended format.
Yeah,
So
sure,
it's a
sure.
good card, right? But she can be dealt with because we have a lot of premium removal, and the same holds true for Phyrexian Obliterator. He's easy to deal with. Any time I've ever gone up against Phyrexian Obliterator, I'm like, okay, cool card, bro. I'm just going to get rid of him. Even if I give you a clue token, you can draw a card, but I got rid of the thing that I have to deal with. And that's
Exactly.
a big deal. So even though we've seen a significant amount of power creep, right, we've seen the power creep answers. So Wizards has done a good job, in my opinion, of creating the card answers to things like a Phyrexian Obliterator or a Shield the Apocalypse or an Atraxa. I mean, you play Atraxa religiously, right? How many times have you played? What? I'm serious. You do. Like,
I
she's
know.
your goddess, and that's okay.
I'm not saying you're wrong.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. I appreciate her. I like her as a card. But how many times do you play her, refill your hand, and then before the end of your turn, your opponent removes her with 2 mana?
Oh yeah,
It
I'd say
happens a
90%
lot,
of the
right?
time. Hmm.
Yeah, because you have to. You have to answer that, and
Yeah.
that's okay. Like, that's the balance to the creep. So if we're going to creep
Exactly.
in a direction, you got to be able to answer it effectively, and that's okay. And I think that we're going to see more of that moving forward, and we'll get into that when we talk about, the extended rotation. But, when we enter a meta where something like a Phyrexian Obliterator is not as backbreaking as it was
When it first
nearly
came out during
10
NuFi.
years ago, good lord, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a big deal. Here's what I'll say, and this is my first point talking about the state of standard after the bans, is we are generally in a healthier place than we were before, Invoke Despair and Fable and Mirror Breaker got banned.
Correct.
Okay? So Fable is incredibly efficient. It's so efficient that it's getting seen in modern and legacy events. Okay? So you drop that card, you get a 2/2. And even if that 2/2 does not give you a treasure token, you get discard on the next turn.
Yeah.
You get to filter your hand for not one, but two cards. Two cards. That's a big deal. And you and I talk about card advantage all the time. Card advantage
Yeah.
is a huge deal because it allows you to filter your hand for stuff that's not good against the matchup, right? And so you rip those two extra cards. Maybe they're lands, but they're better than the two useless cards you had before,
Right.
right? So Fable of the Mirror Breaker was a problem. And then normally, like when I played in the RCQ or even on Arena, normally my opponents would not let the flipped Fable of the Mirror Breaker survive because they understood how backbreaking it was
Right.
to have the ability to copy something. But just those first two chapters on Fable were so advantageous that it was getting seen in every single tier 1 meta deck, and that's a problem.
Yeah.
When whatever you're playing is Rakdos X, that's a problem.
Hmm.
It doesn't diversify the meta, and it does not allow for a healthy and robust standard.
Yeah.
And so it's generally healthier now and has a wider variety of decks and color combos being played. And that's a big deal because, to me, a healthy standard, your tier 1 meta has 4 or 5 different decks that are performing at the top of the meta. Now, 2 or 3 of those will generally perform better, but you've got 4 or 5 of them performing at that, 58 to 65% win rate, right? That's
Yeah.
that's
Above
outperforming.
average. Yeah.
Yeah, it's above average. They're outperforming, is what they say. So that's a healthy meta because now I can sit down and go, well, what do I have? What do I need? Okay, what do I like to play? Before these bans, there was really only a couple of decks that you could play no matter what you liked, right? We were looking at Rakdos X mid range. Well, if you didn't like to play those styles of decks, like I know you're a hardcore control player, and I'm a
Yeah.
classic Timmy mono green player, right?
True.
Those
But
were
you've
useless.
definitely grown since those days.
No, you're right. No, you're right. And part of that was learning how to play different archetypes. But
Yeah.
before these bannings, there was really only one archetype that mattered, and it was dominating the meta, and it was
Yeah.
it was Invoke, Fable, and Friends, right?
Hmm.
Like, so I think these bannings were really healthy. Now, if we want to talk about the last card, Reckoner Bankbuster, I'm kind of up in the air on Reckoner Bankbuster. I understand
Well,
after reading
let me
Watsy's
get
notes about it.
let me get my part into Fable.
Yeah.
So the thing about Fable that is I'm glad it's gone. And the biggest things that I've noticed from
Mhm.
not only Fable but a lot of cards in Standard Period, not just from the Kamigawa set, is everything is almost a 2-for-1 nowadays, and that is not
Mhm.
enough for the removal we have in some cases. Like you were talking about, you mentioned earlier about talking about Shieldred. Shieldred's a 1-for-1 in a sense because you drop her. Sure, she
Yeah.
has abilities that go with her, but you can kill her with one card. That's a 1-for-1. But with Mirror Breaker, you're dropping an enchantment and then you're creating a creature that can
Yeah.
also create a treasure. That's almost a 3-for-1 in a sense if it survives. So when I
Yeah.
was
If you're
playing
not playing
against,
Invoke Despair against it, you were losing.
yeah, well, I mean, not only that,
Yeah.
even for me, as the 5-color Timmy that I am, uh, the only thing I could do about that was I had to choose with my Leyline of the Binding, and there were
Yeah.
times depending on what their land base was, and if they were having a hard time getting lands, I would have to leyline binding a 2/2 token. But then they get the
Yeah.
second chapter of Fable, and I'm like, I didn't want that either. Or there were times like,
Yeah.
okay, they already have 4 mana up. What's one more gonna do at this point? So then I would get rid of Fable itself and leave the token. That way they don't have the card.
Yeah.
Like having to make that type of decision when all they had to do was tap 3, and they almost get
Yeah.
3-for-1. It's not fun. It's terrible. Um, Now the downside, which we're seeing a repeat of, do you remember? Obviously, I'm sure you remember Cobblade,
Yeah.
that deck, that blue-white deck with
Yep.
Jace the Mind Sculptor when he first came out, and we had
Hmm.
Squad Hawks in there and everything, and then we had Stoneforge
Oh
Mystic and all
yeah.
the swords. That took over Standard, right?
Stoneforge.
And then it
Yeah.
got banned. What happened to that deck? It went card for card directly into Modern until Jace got
Yep.
banned, and then Stoneforge
Yep.
got banned. So what I'm trying to say with that is we are now in that same predicament where almost every card from this standard Rakdos deck is now in Pioneer. Not Modern, but
Yep.
Pioneer. And the reason I know that is because when I played here in Japan, when I'm playing Pioneer, you know, when the bans happened, I was like, dude, I'm so stoked for Standard. That's cool. I'm feeling happy. Let's play some Pioneer. What happened
Mhm.
on turn 3? Fable the Mirror Breaker. What happened
Yep.
by turn 4? Invoke Despair. And by turn 5, they
Yep.
went ahead and dropped a Shieldred. Like,
Yep.
I'm back in Standard again. And even though I
Mhm.
have availability to Pio cards, it's still it's the Cobblade scene all over again. So
Yeah.
I don't know what they're gonna do, but it was definitely a bad taste in my mouth for trying to get back into Pio, because I can't afford Modern. That's a whole nother discussion. But
Different topic, another
yeah,
podcast.
yeah, I was really excited to get back into Pio, but then it just reminded me of the Cobblade era, and now we're
Well,
kind
and
of in that again.
here's the deal. I don't. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just coughing. Go.
Oh, hey, I don't fault Wizards for printing any of this. And you're right. Pio is kind of turned into Standard Plus, right? Like you get the same core shell that you're just like, oh my god, this is just what I saw in Standard before the ban. But
Yeah.
here's the deal: Magic in general is an evolving game, right? When you look at the last nearly 30 years, well, it's 30 years this year, right, of
Yeah.
Magic the Gathering and where they came from. In order to keep it fresh, in order to do new things, in order to keep people playing the game, they have to come up with new mechanics, new card types. I remember, you and I, we even talked about when they first printed modal dual-faced cards, right? We were like, oh my god,
Mm-hmm.
there's a magic card on the other side of this card. That was like revolutionary, right?
Yeah.
So they have to do new things, and they experiment with all kinds of stuff. And we talk about power creep, but like there's a point at which, in order to keep it fresh, it's like making a new iPhone, right? Like if you don't do something new and innovative,
No one will buy it.
nobody's gonna buy it,
Yeah.
right? And I get it. At the end of the day, like they're there to make money, and that's okay to a point,
To an
right?
extent, yeah.
But to an extent, and that's a different podcast topic that we can cover
Yeah.
later. But anyway, my point is that I get it. They print these cards, whether it's reprints or new cards, and they're trying to keep it fresh and innovative and new, and that's okay. What I really appreciate, and I don't think a lot of people are, what was it, about 2-3 years ago? It was about 2 years ago, I guess, when they had the huge bans in Standard. They got rid of Omnath. They got rid of the what was the gate?
In
The Gruul
Standard,
gate. Yeah,
the Gruul Gate.
yeah, it was. Crap, Samsonite. What was the name of that card? You exile like the top 4 cards of your library, or 5 cards, or whatever. You play them to the end of your next turn. Anyway, right? It was in there with Omnath. It was really toxic. It wasn't a
That's
gate.
it was a
It was
land
like
though.
enter. No, it was a sorcery that let you exile X number of cards from the top of your library.
What colors
What is
was
this
it?
card? Red and green. It was 5 mana.
Escape the Wilds.
Yes, Escape the
Yes.
Wild.
I'll look it up. Uh, I don't really recall. It starts with an S. So swummy, slippy, slappy, slimmin, summon, Swanson?
Maybe it's on the briefcase. Look on the.
Oh yeah, it's right here. Samsonite. I was way off. I knew it started with an S though.
Thank you,
Escape the
Samsonite.
Wilds.
Escape the
Was
Wilds,
way
right?
off.
That was way off. Anyway, right? So, like, when they banned Omnath and Escape to the Wilds, and there's, like, something else, right? Like, or
Yeah.
maybe there's just those two, right? Like, everybody was enraged because they were like, oh my god, they banned more cards now than they ever have in Standard at the same
Yeah.
time. Because at that same time, they got rid of the Red Anvil. What was it?
Yeah.
The red
Past and Flames or Fires. No, Fires of.
Fires of Invention,
There you go. Yeah.
right? So at that time, that was the most number of standard cards that we had had banned in like 10 years. And everybody was up in flames. But Wizards just extended standard by a year and then banned 3 cards at the same time. So what I really appreciate about it is even though they're not afraid to innovate, they're not afraid to print wild cards like Invoke Despair, right? They're also proactive about addressing the problems. They're like, oops, we made a mistake, let's fix it. And what I was talking about yesterday with a couple of other friends of ours is I say I'll believe it when I see it. If we're going to extend standard by another year and we're going to see Sheoldred for another 18 months, right? They need to be proactive about staying on top of fixing the problems. And as long as they do that, I think it will stay healthy. So even though we have a power creep where Phyrexian Obliterator is not good anymore, and Sheoldred is in 3 of the top 5 Tier 1 decks, at least they're looking at the problem and saying, okay, this is what we need to do to settle it. And I think it's really important because now we're in a position where players are able to play different kinds of strategies and the door is open for other card types. With Invoke Despair getting banned, right?
Yeah.
We have big enchantments and planeswalkers coming back, and that's a big deal because there are 2 of the new 8 card types that are kind of a crucial fulcrum for a lot of decks.
Yeah.
And in a meta where Invoke Despair can just absolutely bend you over and draw a card and your opponent loses 2 life and sacrifices it, right? Because like Hexproof doesn't matter, Indestructible doesn't matter.
Correct.
Right? That's really important. And so I think they did a really good thing by getting rid of Invoke Despair and Fable of the Mirror Breaker because Invoke did too much for what it was worth without any maze or without, even if Invoke didn't draw your opponent a card, that might have been better. But then Fable was too efficient, so it got you into an Invoke Despair.
Yeah.
And then we look at the 3rd card from the banning, which is Reckoner Bankbuster. I actually had mixed feelings about the banning on Reckoner Bankbuster because it is a colorless card and it's a 2-drop artifact, right? And so when I look at cards like Reckoner Bankbuster, I go, yeah, but anybody can play that card. Like, it's good in all decks. It's good in Bant. It's good in 5-color control. It's good in mono black. It's good in Azorius control. Like, anybody could play that card. And so I don't necessarily think of it as a card that should be at the top of a ban list. But then reading the notes, when WotC talked about, hey, this was affecting card choice, right? So you wanted a 2 or 3 drop that could easily crew the Bankbuster into an aggro style offense. Okay, I understand that because it's not like what was not the Mind Stone? What was?
I was looking
What
for
was
the
the
other
one
card.
before?
There's the one that got banned during Kaladesh, right? Smuggler's Copter. That's what I was thinking. I don't think it's on.
Copter. Yeah.
Copter.
That's what they. Yep, that's what they compared it to, and I think they're right. I think they were right about that because
it was mostly because of the fact that it was a colorless 2-drop. That was the biggest comparison to Copter.
Yeah.
And Bankbuster is the fact that it can go in any and every single deck, which in most cases is good for some archetypes of decks, so they have a way to draw. But the fact that it just went main deck into Rakdos just gave the efficiency it needed to just go over the top, and that was one of the issues.
It went main deck into every deck.
Correct, but in some decks it was
2 to 4 copies.
Too good.
Yeah, no, I agree. And so while I typically look at a card like Bankbuster and say, well, okay, but it's a colorless, so anybody can play it, just play better cards. It made card choices. It made people make different choices in their deck construction. That was a big deal. So I get it. But
so
in general,
for the Bankbuster, I think we're both at the same point with this card is that if they didn't ban this, we both would have been fine.
Yeah.
It
I
would
agree.
have been fine in the meta still. It was just the fact that the deck that it was in when it came to the Rakdos deck, it just made the deck itself just too efficient. But
Yes.
these two bannings right here of Fable and Despair came too late, but I'm glad they're here.
Yes.
And to kind of go
Yes.
back to what you had
I agree.
mentioned, the fact that they extended standard for a year, I'm more worried about now that I've kind of let it sink in, and because I remember when it first came out, you and I were both stoked about it. Like, dope, it's going to be longer to play cards because
Yeah.
so many new sets are coming out. Cards almost feel like they're rotating because power creep, you know. So
Yeah.
with a year, extra year, we were like, cool, we're going to be able to play cards and this and that. Now my concern though is that they have to, like you mentioned, they have to keep up with the bannings to make it that standard will be fun, and people hate that.
Yes.
Well, you know, if you're playing standard, you should not be playing standard with investment in mind. You should not be playing standard
Correct.
with the mindset of, oh, I put this type of money in. No, that's not standard. That's not what you should be doing. If you're
Correct.
doing that, go play EDH. I'm gonna be honest with you.
Correct.
Go play
Yep.
EDH. Go play Modern. Go play Legacy. Go play
Modern.
Vintage. That's where, and I could definitely understand people getting upset in those formats if something gets banned like that, because that's a lot of money at that point. But you're in standard,
Yep.
homie. You cannot be upset because you spent so and so money on it. That's just the market sets the value of the card.
Yep.
You wanted to play that deck, you put that money into
Yep.
it. Stop looking at it as an investment. Play the deck. If it gets banned, SOL. It happens. That's the name of the
Yeah.
game.
Let's be honest. Like, standard's never been, quote, an investment to begin with, right? Because
No, never.
the most expensive card in standard right now is probably Shieldred, and a pack rare is $60.
And
Like,
Atraxa.
that's
Atraxa might
an
be a little bit more
Atraxa,
than that.
right? Yeah, it's
Either
probably a
way.
little bit more, but you rip one of those cards out of a $25 pack, and you more than made your money back, right?
Correct.
But that's not why we're picking up cards for standard. We're picking up cards for standard as singles to play a deck that we're building, right?
Yeah.
So, and you and I have talked about this before. Like, the best players in the game, we're talking about like the Jim Davises of the world, like pro tour players. They're playing standard. Why are they playing standard? Because standard is the premier format for Magic the Gathering. That's what your RCQs are. That's what your Pro Tours are. That's what your Worlds are playing. Yep. So no matter what you say about Standard, no matter how you feel, that's what the best players in the game play.
For the past
so if you're
30
not
years.
playing for the past 30 years, if you're not playing Standard, you ain't shit.
Yeah.
I hate to put it that way. You can bleep me out if you need to for the YouTubes, but
Nah, I don't care.
if you're not playing standard, you ain't in it, right?
Yeah.
And so all these
At
people that
the
are hating on
level,
it,
at the highest competitive level, sure, yeah.
Yeah, at the highest level of competitive Magic, they're playing standard. They're not playing EDH or Commander versus whatever. We could make a whole nother YouTube blog chat about that. If you're not, Modern is great. It's the second most popular format, but it's not the most competitive. It's not what the pro players are playing. If you're not in Standard, you're not playing Magic.
Yeah.
And I get it. I understand why people were upset before about their cards rotating every 18 to 24 months. I get it. But now we have another year of Standard, right? So it's going to be nearly 18 months, so September, November next year before Shieldred is gone.
Well, we're gonna get this.
Learn.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just saying, like, learn to deal with Shieldred. Like, there's plenty of ways to deal with it. But as we said, that means Wizards has to be proactive about bannings. And I'll even say this: I think you and I have talked about this before, where I'm okay with Wizards going into Standard with a restricted list. Traditionally, they only do that with Legacy and Vintage, where you're only allowed to play one card of that type. Right? Standard might be ready for a restricted list. If I know that my opponent is only playing one Invoke Despair, I see that Invoke Despair. Cool. That does not break my deck. Exactly. That does not break the backbone of my Azorius control or my Jund mid-range, right? Like, okay, you stabilize the board for a turn in turn 5, 6, or 7.
Yeah.
But that's it. That's all I'm going to see. And so I would even say to Wizards, it might be time to introduce restrictions to standard.
Yeah, I remember you mentioning that, and I do remember my take on it was I didn't necessarily agree with it because I didn't like the restriction access like they have in other formats such as Vintage. Um, but I think the more that I thought about it and everything, I wouldn't mind seeing that. You know what? I wouldn't mind trying that out because I think that would feel better to certain people when they think that standard
Mm-hmm.
is an investment and they feel that okay, well at least I can play 2 of my 4 Atraxas or 2 of my 4 Shieldreds, you know, and they don't
Yeah.
feel like they lost
Or bank
everything.
busters.
Yeah,
Yep.
or Bank Buster. Yeah, even if they did that for Bank Buster and just said you can only have 2 in the deck, that would have been fine.
Yeah,
Um,
I think
so
so.
I think if they keep going this way with power creep in standard, then yes, we should try the restricted for the format and see how that goes rather than just straight banning things. Um, and then when it comes to Bob Saget, R.I.P. There was something I was gonna mention that we were just that you brought up and we were talking about, and I just can't remember what it was. Um, damn, because I'm trying not to
Because
interrupt
you
you as
suck
you
at
talk.
life,
I mean, it's
or
a whole nother podcast, but like, um, oh, my Lanta. I'm definitely gonna think for a minute.
aphasia.
I'm probably cut this part out, but still, it was something we were talking about
Engineers.
Invoke. It was about Bankbuster, Invoke, and then the bannings and things like that. I don't know. Did I finish my thought when I said about when it comes to the year long? My concern is that
Oh, go ahead.
with the year long extension to standard, my concern is that they're gonna wait too long to do bannings, and they need to be doing
Yes.
bannings more than people want. Maybe even once or twice a year. If they're going to be extending standard,
Yep.
that needs to happen. And in all honesty, with what is it? Return to Eldraine or whatever it's called. Return to Eldraine. That's going to be a soft rotation. And if they do things
Yeah.
like that, that's fine. And what I mean by that is because they are planning to ban a few cards during the Eldraine release. They already mentioned that. And I
Yes.
can almost guarantee you Atraxa will be banned. You could mark me now. I almost guarantee Atraxa will be banned for standard.
Yeah.
And
So I agree.
I don't think Atraxa is necessarily a problem, to be honest. I think, oddly enough, that she's a decently fair card in the sense that,
Hmm.
if I can bring it up, like I'm big dumb over here. Okay, in the sense that I think that Atraxa is fair, is that she doesn't have haste. If she
Correct.
had haste, this card would be broken and would not be able to be properly played. They'd have to
Correct.
emergency ban her, and that would mean that they specifically made, if she had haste, that they specifically created this card for other formats and not standard. If they had to immediately ban her because they gave her
Mhm.
haste. Now,
Yeah.
because she doesn't have haste, is why she's fair. Sure, you get to draw up to 7 cards. There are some times where I only draw 3.
Nobody up to 8.
We got land, creature, artifact, instant, sorcery, planeswalker, um, enchantment, and what's the 8th one I'm missing?
Battle.
Oh, it does say battle. Oh, look at that.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Good call.
There's 8 card types now. Yeah. Good
Yeah.
call. Yeah.
Okay. So
I
so
know.
you
I'm
can
good at
draw
this.
up to. You can tell I'm not a good player. You can draw up to 8 cards with this card. And so I think the fairness in this is that she costs 7. And not only that, she
Yes.
doesn't have haste. And not only that, she can be killed with Shieldred's Edict. She can be killed with Fateful
Yep.
Absence. She can be killed with Go for the
Yep.
Throat. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily see.
Infernal Grasp. Yep.
Yeah, there's ways to get rid of her, and so I don't see her as a problem. This is the crazy thing. When they play a Shieldred, or excuse me, an Atraxa, I don't have that fear that I do
Mm-mm.
when they play Invoke, because
Correct.
these are 2 completely different power levels, and honestly, I
Yes.
think Invoke is way higher than Atraxa. Even if you can cheat her
Agreed.
into play, Invoke is a power level leagues beyond Atraxa.
Well, and that's what we're doing right now, right? Like we're cheating her into play because she is 7, but we
I
can,
mean, y'all are.
get her
I'm
into
not.
play
I'm
on
hard
turn 4
casting
or
this hoe.
5. No, you're not. Shut up. No,
Yes,
you're
I
not.
am. Yes, I am.
I know you are. I know you are.
What are you doing?
Shut your mouth.
You shut your mouth when you're talking to me.
So I think like honestly Atraxa. I mean I could see her getting banned. 100%. I could see her
Yes.
getting banned. It's
Well, and
unfortunate
I agree
because
with your statement.
I don't think she's that much of a problem.
She's not. She's really not. And that can take us into our next segue. But you said it even a few weeks ago. Like, most people are cheating her in, and she's big. But I think the most important statement you made was because she's from a recent set, she's selling cards, she's selling packs, she's selling boxes.
Yep.
And that's a big deal. So it's just like when Omnath was a problem 2 years ago. They didn't ban Omnath until he had been in the format for a year because he was selling cards. So I think Atraxa is there, not quite the power level of Omnath, but it's a big deal. If you can even cheat her in, or if you hardcast her like you do, that's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 cards that I'm ripping out of my deck, and you're still sitting on 2.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
that's
go
like
ahead.
And that's the worst of her. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that would be the worst case scenario. Actually, my apologies. The worst case scenario is if you had 2 cards in hand, I rip 6 cards off, and you don't have a way to kill her. Obviously, that's worst case scenario. But if you do kill her, I just paid 7 to draw 3 to 6 to 8 cards, and sometimes I have to discard after that. So I mean, it's not like I get to keep. Yeah, it's not like I get to keep all of them. But at the same time, I don't see this on the level of Invoke. It's just ridiculous. And so that kind of brings me back again. That's my concern is that with the extension of a 1 year, and this is tinfoil hat coming on, with the extension of a 1 year, it makes me wonder if WotC is extending standard so they can get more money out of packs and cards with the powerhouse that they're bringing in future sets. Because they took way too long to ban this, Invoke Despair. They took way too long to ban Fable. And they took way too long to ban, Omnath. And, they're just taking their sweet time because they know that as long as it's still in the standard format, it's going to sell the packs. And that's my concern with the extra year long that's going to be coming to standard. Is that I'm looking at this again with the tinfoil hat, that WotC is looking at this extension as a possible revenue option to make more money. If we extend standard, we don't have to ban things as much, and we can let things kind of go out and get more sales. I mean, look at Meathook. Meathook should have been banned a long ass time ago, but no, they waited until they got enough money out of the set, and that's the bottom line truth. And everybody can see that.
Yeah. Well, and I get it. At the end of the day, they're a corporate business trying to make money, but we're talking about the health of a format, something that's diverse and keeps people coming back and playing. They have to be more proactive. And like I told a couple of our buddies yesterday, I'll believe it when I see it. They say they're going to do these things. They say they're going to leave a window after every single set release to do emergency bannings. Okay, I'll believe it when I see it. When you do the thing that you say you're going to do, then I'll believe that you're being proactive about it. Otherwise, we're just going to sit on it for 6 to 8 months. And they're going to be like, oh my God, we made a mistake. And right now, I don't think Atraxa is a mistake. I think she's strong and powerful in the meta, but I don't think she's a mistake. Yet.
Yet, because we have to see what comes out. But the one card that I think possibly could get banned over Atraxa or at the same time is this hoe right here. This I can see. This is more of a problem than Atraxa is, which is just crazy to say.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
It's the fact that you could play this, and then you can get the Atraxa off of it as well. And
it's not even that.
And not only that, you can get something else from your opponent as well. Like you're putting almost 3 things. You're putting like 3 things on the board. So when I play against this deck a lot, it's the Reanimator. They run 2 Atalis and usually 4 Atraxas, and that's why I run Stone Brain.
Yep.
So the thing about Itali is like, I think I killed one of their creatures, and then they played one creature, which was like a low like a 2-drop or whatever, maybe it's a 3, whatever. But then they played the Itali on top of that, and then all of a sudden I wiped their board and they had 4 creatures out. Itali, whatever the little thing was, my Atraxa,
Yep.
and then something else. Like
Yep.
like holy crap! Like if this just got one card from your own graveyard, I'd feel better about it. But the fact that it does it from mine as well, that's why
Yes.
in my deck I don't run too many creatures. I run like 2 to 4, if that. Because of this card. So
well,
I think this could be a possible ban, is Itali as well.
maybe. Here's the thing. I don't like any Magic card like Siphon Insight or Itali that rips your opponent's cards. I'm not a fan of that because your opponent has built a deck, right? Like they've done a thing, but at the end of the day, like a card like Itali or Siphon Insight, it really just kind of doesn't feel magic-y, right? It doesn't feel like you're playing Magic. It feels like your opponent is playing Magic. And I get it. Sometimes you get to play Magic. Sometimes you get to watch your opponent play Magic. But a lot of times it's, you didn't rip enough lands or you ripped too many.
Yeah.
But cards like Itali that get so much value out of their own deck and yours, that's a feel bad, right?
Yeah.
And it kind of sucks when we talk about the feel bads, but it does because that's the kind of things that turn people off to a format or Magic in general.
Yeah.
This is a reminder. Let Roxy out.
Hey, let Roxy out.
This is a reminder.
Yeah, I'll let her
Let
out.
Roxy
You can cut that out. It's my damn Alexa.
This is a reminder.
So my
It's
kids don't
1900
forget to let the
hours.
dogs out of the
Shower
fucking house.
time. This is a reminder. It's 1900 hours. Shower time.
If we can go into the top 5 cards too, if you want.
Yeah, let's do it. You want me to start the top 5 here?
Do you have a top 5 already? I didn't write down a top 5, but
I
I
do.
mean, I can.
do.
Okay, yeah, go ahead with yours.
I
and
absolutely do.
And then
So-
we can go from there. So just give me the name and I'll put it in.
So I'm gonna start at the bottom, right? I'm gonna 5, 4,
Sure,
3, 2,
number
1.
5.
So
Wait,
I'm gonna
now,
start at the bottom.
Is this your personal top 5 for standard, or do you think these are top 5 cards being played, or what do you think? What is
It's top 5 in the meta. And what I did is I went and I researched the tier 1 into tier 2 meta and looked at the cards that were being played. And so if you're playing the standard meta, these are the cards that you need to be focusing on.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So number 5, I'm going to start with Go for the Throat. So I kind of put this in a general category. So when I talk about cards like Go for the Throat, I'm talking about any premium 2-mana removal. This could also include like Fateful Absence, Infernal Grasp, right? So any of these 2-mana, and the ones I'm talking about are black or white because those are the largest card colors in the standard meta right now.
Sure.
I'm a big fan of Infernal Grasp. Everybody's playing for Go for the Throat. But when I was playing competitive, I went Infernal Grasp because I didn't give a shit about 2 life lost.
Right.
And but that'll take us into the top of the list in a little bit, and I'll tell you why. But there is so much premium removal right now. So whether it's Shieldred's Edict, Go for the Throat, Infernal Grasp, Fateful Absence, we even got in the 1-drop, we've got Cut Down and Lay Down Arms. I'm not typically a big fan of those cards just because they're really dependent on being on the play, right? So those cards like Cut Down or Lay Down Arms are the best when you're going to be on the play, but they're easy to sideboard out in a best of 3 game when you're going to be on the draw if you won game 1. So they're okay. But when I'm talking about removal, I'm talking about premium removal, so that whether you're on the play or on the draw, you've got the Fateful Absence, the Infernal Grasp, Go for the Throat, Shieldred's Edict. Those are the top removal cards. Yes, 3 out of 4 of those are in black. That's a big deal. And as we move up this list, we'll see why that matters.
Yeah. So now, would you put Soul Partition in there? Because you reminded me about this card, and I honestly forget about it, and it is just so powerful. But it is
It is.
not the title of what you said, premium removal. So that's why I'm just wondering if you think could this fit into that slot of one of your removals?
It could, but the place where I play Soul Partition is in blue-white control.
Correct.
So Soul Partition is not straight. I call it pseudo removal, and it is very much a premium pseudo removal card. And when I'm playing blue-white control, what I want to do is force my opponent to make the same choice over and over and over, because when they drop a 3 or 4 drop, right? Whenever they drop, a Graveyard Trespasser or a Shieldred, I want to make them do it again. Because every single time they cast that card, they're tapping out their mana in the first 6, 7, 8 turns. They're not playing it next to another card. So yes, Soul Partition is a great pseudo removal card. Because your opponent's going to go, oh my god, you bounced my Shieldred, but I'm going to play it again on turn 6. Okay, well, it's too late. You gave me 2 more draws. I'm going to counter it. Or I'm going to straight remove it. Or I'm going to board wipe this turn, right? Yeah. So Soul Partition is a great card, much like...
it's definitely tempo,
what's the band? It is definitely tempo. I definitely throw in the tempo category. It's much like... the Bant card that puts it on the top of the library, right? From
Bob Saget, R.I.P. I know which one you're talking
Endless.
about. Is it Endless? Yeah, Endless Detour.
Yes, Endless Detour. A lot like Endless Detour, right?
Yeah.
Because you're like, oh my god, you played that permanent. Let me put it back on top of your library. Well, what are they going to do? They're probably going to try to play it again, right? So like, it's a great tempo card that buys you turns. That's what things like Endless Detour and Soul Partition do, is they buy you turns.
Correct.
Now,
when you don't
at the number
black
5,
and have the hard removal. That's
correct. Yeah. So if I'm going to go to the number 5 slot, I'm going to say it's going to be premium hard removal, like Faithful Absence, Infernal Grasp, Go for the Throat. And Children's Edict is a great versatile card if you're playing black.
Yeah, I'd have to say that's one of my favorite removal spells is Children's Edict. I usually pick that, in all honesty, over all of these. Just because of the versatility of it. The fact that I can get rid of a walker on this is just so rewarding. And it helps me get rid of Thrun, too. So that's always a plus, because I'm seeing Thruns a lot.
Yep, I'm starting to see a lot more of those. So it's always between Children's Edict and Fateful Absence. And the reason I like Absence is because it gets rid of Planeswalkers. Now, a lot of people don't like Absence because it gives your opponent a card. But if I'm playing the right deck, I don't care if they draw a card.
Exactly.
I'm going to counter it, or I'm going to make them discard it, right? And you and I have had the conversation, and I've even talked to, like, Tom about Go for the Throat versus Infernal Grasp, which is better, because they both have a downside. One costs you life, one is a Doomblade. The problem that I have with Go for the Throat is when it really matters, when I need to get rid of a thing, I can't target it because it's a Skrelv, or it's the Flying Angel artifact, or you see what I'm saying? Like, it's not
whatever.
the Steel Seraph, right? Like, it's a Steel Seraph or a Skrelv. I need to be able to absolutely remove that creature every single time, and typically I'm running Shieldred in that deck because it's already playing black. So if I'm playing Shieldred, I'm always going to prefer Infernal Grasp because I'm going to get that life back.
Exactly.
Yep, absolutely. So it's a 2-mana destroy target creature. Period. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Now, maybe my opponent gets rid of it, but then I only paid 2 life to get rid of your Atraxa, or your Atali, or your, your Titan, right? Titan of Industry. Sure. Like, I paid 2 life to get rid of the thing that's going to deal me 7, so I'm okay with that. Or I'll pay 2 life and 2 mana to get rid of your Graveyard Trespasser. Get out of here with it. So I'm a big fan of Infernal Grasp over anything else. But that's my number 5 slot. My number 5 slot is any premium 2-mana removal. Because
Gotcha.
when we look at cut down or lay down arms, they're too conditional. Lay down arms is great in a mono white deck.
Sure.
Right? Cut down is great in a mono black deck. But in that 1-drop slot, I want to be able to play a tapped land without fear. Yeah. Just like I talked about a little bit ago. I need to be able to play that tapped land without going, oh my god, I'm going to lose tempo. No, I'm not. Because I'm going to play my Triome, or I'm going to play my Haunted Ridge. And then I'm going to pass turn. And then you're going to go into turn 1, and you might play a turn 1 card. If you don't, I'm going to go into turn 2, and I'm going to have my 2-mana premium removal up. And then you're going to go into turn 2, and you're going to play a creature, and I'm going to remove it. Or if you play a creature on turn 1, I go into my turn 2, and I remove it on my turn because you're tapped out.
Yeah.
So, my number 5 slot in the standard best 5 cards is any 2-mana premium removal.
Okay. Fair.
Where are you at number 5?
For my number 5, it would probably be it would be a 2-drop. Let me see if I can even spell it.
Ossification.
Yes.
Enchantment, 2-drop, white, OSS.
It is 2 S's. Okay.
IF. Yep.
All right, yeah.
There it
Ossification
is.
Would be my number 5. Especially since Invoke Despair is gone, this is now premium removal in the words that you're saying for walkers. Because it only gets creatures or walkers, but in all honesty, those are the most brutal things you have to get rid of. Right now, battles and enchantments aren't as brutal because Fable is gone, and you don't have to worry about Fable. That was the one thing you really had to worry about. But Ossification, like the fact that it's a 2-drop and it's just a consistent that it can be tutored out as well with other cards, and it can be copied with Calyx. It gets broken pretty quick and pretty fast, and I think it's I think the Calyx Ossification, I'm not seeing it as much as I was seeing it when the bans first happened, but that kind of combo with Ossification and Calyx is just it's backbreaking. Just in sense as a number 5 card, I would probably put Ossification on there because I don't have to worry about Invoke Despair anymore, which is great, but I have to worry about Ossification for my walkers, and I'm okay with that because that's a fair card. I don't see a problem with that. Because the best thing about playing against an Ossification is if you're playing Standard and you know the meta, you should be playing Field of Ruin. So there's a way to get rid of the Ossification. So I can Field of Ruin that land. Wait, actually, let me see.
No, you can't because it's basic.
Basic land. No, I cannot. Okay, yeah. But either way, it's still Ossification.
Almost like R&D balanced it.
Yeah, I know, right? That's what I'm saying. Like, it's fair. It's a fair card.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that. I think there was a different way that... Oh, it's a different card, which is on my list. I'll get to it later as how I got rid of it. It wasn't Field of Ruin. I remember now. So, anyway, yeah. Mine's pretty simple. It'd be Ossification as a number 5.
So Ossification made my number 4 list. Ossification is in the top 5. I put it as number 4.
Oh wait, let me get it up on the
card.
Okay.
So Ossification, when researching the meta, is my top 4 standard card. Let me tell you why. Because Ossification is not just played in Standard. Good buddy that I play with all the time. It's being played in Modern.
Really?
So this card gets rid of any creature or planeswalker. And in some decks, even in the Modern format where creatures matter, Ossification is a 2-mana premium removal card. Now, It's a board removal, right? We call it board removal. So it's sitting on the board, you might be able to get it back. If it's a token, it's gone forever. But it gives you the tempo. It gives you the ability to just absolutely turn the game around. It gets rid of an Atraxa, right?
Yeah.
So you tap 7 mana for an Atraxa, I untap, I play an Ossification, and for 2 mana, I just pulled her off the board. That's a big deal because she's flying, lifelink, death touch, vigilance, right?
Yeah.
Ossification is my number 4 on the top 5 cards for a couple of reasons. One, it's getting seen played in Selesnya enchantments, mono white soldiers, and mono white mid range. Like, this card is just getting played all over the place, and we got a buddy. He absolutely hates this fucking card. He thinks it should not exist. He thinks it should be banned, right? Because it's that
Crazy.
good.
Yeah, but
And it's in an aura. I agree with you, but it infuriates so many players because they're like, I just did my thing. I just blew my hand on a card, and then for 2 mana, you made it go away.
Yeah.
For 2 mana. And it's an aura that enchants a land, not a creature. That's kind of a big deal because a basic land, there's not really anything you could do. There's definitely not anything you could do about it in Standard. You can't deal with a basic land in Standard. You can deal with enchantments, but only if you're playing a deck that's expecting that, right?
Right.
So unless you're playing, I don't know, like Defabricate or
your homeboy here does.
You know, oh yeah, oh no, if only I knew somebody, right? Like, unless you're playing a card that will specifically deal with a standard land or the triggered ability,
correct,
it's really hard to deal with, and it can remove any Planeswalker. It can remove a Jace, it can remove an Emperor, it can remove an Atraxa. It can remove a Sheoldred. It just gets it out of the way and allows you to open up the field, right?
Yeah.
So it's a problem.
Yeah.
Now, do I think it's a bad problem? No. I agree with you. It's a balanced problem.
Correct.
Because any deck playing white should probably play at least 2 copies of this card.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if they're playing white, they're most likely playing 4. Like, this is just a 4 of in Selesnya enchantments and blue-white soldiers. You just run the 4 of because, like you said, it is your premium removal. And if you're going for aggro as soldiers, you're wanting to get those creatures out of the way so you can keep getting that damage in, especially if you already have a Thalia out. I mean, you're already slowing them down. So, yeah, no, this I'm glad we both put this on our list. It, like, honestly, it doesn't matter where we put it on the list. It's the fact that it's just on both of our lists. I think is really cool.
Yeah, I think so.
So that was your number 4, you said?
That was my number 4. What's your number 4?
My number 4 would be Atraxa.
Interesting. Why?
So it's the Reanimator deck that's seeing this played, and the fact that she just does so much. I mean, we already had a discussion about her as to why she's just so good. I don't think she's a problem. I think she's a great card. I'd say she's about 75% balanced, in the fact that, like I mentioned before, she doesn't have haste. I think that's a huge thing. Because I'm not going to lie, sometimes I forget, because, you know, my memories, it's really garbage. Sometimes I'm like, when they pull her out...
welcome to the club.
Yeah. when she hits the board on my opponent's side, I'm like, oh my god, does she have haste? No. I'm like, okay, good. And then because at that point, I'm like, I don't have a way to remove her. I have to wait until I get my board wipe as a control player, you know? So, you know, that happens. But I think the fact that it's a, you're paying 7 or you're reanimating with, like, a 5-drop or a 6 or 7-drop to reanimate it, I think it's a fair enough card to be played in Standard, and it's seeing plenty of play. Like I said, the Reanimator deck runs 4 of these over the 2 Atalis. So, I mean, there's just no reason why it shouldn't be on a list in general, I think. Or at least on my list, I should say. And plus, I love playing this card. And I only run it as a 2-of, so... so that'd be my 4.
Okay. That's awesome, because Atraxa Grand Unifier is my number 3. So, Atraxa is my number 3 in Standard right now. 2 reasons. 1, she's incredibly easy to reanimate. Okay? So, there's 2 or... Well, actually, if you look at uncommon cards, there's like 3 or 4 ways to reanimate her quickly.
Oh, sure.
Now, right? Because there's a 5-drop uncommon right now that will just rip a card out of your graveyard on the battlefield. I think it's 5
Yeah,
drop.
it's
Anyway,
4 and 5, right? 4 and white, 4 and a black.
it's Shieldred something. And then you exile the sorcery. Anyway, my point is, she's really easy to get back out of your graveyard if you're discarding the crap out of her. Now, with Fable of Mirror Breaker out of the meta, it's a little bit more difficult to put her into your... Yeah, there it is. Shieldred's Restoration. 4 drop. See? Look. Turn 4.
Mm-hmm.
Turn 4. I could put her into play on my battlefield. Okay?
Yeah.
So, one, you can cheat her into play. 2, she's actually, and as we talked about earlier with the mana base, she's actually really easy to just hard cast, even though she has a 4 mana color requirement.
Right.
You can actually hard cast the crap out of her on turn 7. And if you've been controlling the game with premium removal and counter spells up to turn 7, you just drop her. But here, as we said before, is why it's important, because I don't care about Atraxa. I care about the fact that she gives me 4 to 8 cards.
Yep.
So now you're still sitting on 2 cards, and I've got a grip, and I'm going to discard the hand size, and I'm going to discard a land. Even if you remove her at my end step, I don't care. She still did the thing I needed her to do. She might as well be a 7 mana sorcery that says, look at the top 1/6 of your library and pick 6 or 8 cards, right?
Yeah.
Right? And so if you're on turn 7, you're talking about nearly a fifth of your library. You get to look at it. I'm going to pick 5 cards that are going to make me bank and pay me dividends over the course of this game. I don't care if you remove her. Now, wait a minute. You couldn't remove Atraxa. That's pretty much game. That's it. Right there. It's over. Because I'm going to hit you for 7 in the air.
Exactly. There's a lot of times where I'll just windmill slam an Atraxa, and I know I'm tapped out as a control player. You don't ever want to be tapped out.
Well.
But I'm windmilling an Atraxa.
I'll do it anyway.
If you don't have an answer, then good luck. And if you do
if
have
you're
an
not
answer,
holding a defabricate, you lose.
Yeah, and I'm like, if you do have an answer, good for you. I just refilled my hand. I
Yay.
tapped out. Totally worth it.
Yay.
Go ahead.
Exactly.
You know? And so I think that's why, as a control player, I feel completely fine just windmilling a card and tapping out, because normally you just don't want to do that. It's very scary as a control player to just tap out.
Normally, you would be correct. But the fact that she picks up so many cards for a control player, it makes it worth it.
I think the fact that she doesn't say, draw 4 or something like that. The fact that you get to look at them and pick is really
10 cards.
really good.
You get to look at 10 cards.
That's what I'm saying. And then you get to pick the ones you want. It's almost like picking it's exactly that, picking a brand new hand. It's exactly what it is.
Yes, and it doesn't say pick 3 or 4. It says pick 1 of each card type.
Correct.
So when you're looking at any matchup, there's a couple of different types of cards that your opponent's not going to be weak against, especially after Invoke Despair has been banned. Oh, you're not good at dealing with enchantments or battles. Oh, you're not good at dealing with creatures or planeswalkers. Well, I've got a little bit of everything in my deck, so I'm going to go ahead and pick those up. Those are the cards I'm going to prioritize in my plays, and you're going to suffer.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people who were going to cry and shout about this being banned are the ones that, like me, who hated playing against Invoke Despair. But, unlike me, they're not looking at it from a perspective of gameplay where it's technically a fair card, and I think that's fine. Like, if they don't ban Atraxa, I wouldn't feel bad about it. If they did, that sucks. But at the same time, it's like, okay, I can also understand. Okay. I can understand. But at the same time, I just don't want it to get banned because people are crying about it. Invoke needed to get banned because of how broken it was.
Yes.
And it had nothing to do with how people were crying about it, because guess what? Nobody was. Everybody was playing it, and they wanted to keep it.
Yeah.
So it's a complete opposite. And I think what's going to happen is people are going to cry about Atraxa, and that's why she'll get banned. And again, I wouldn't care if she did or didn't, but the reasoning behind it is what would kind of upset me. Because it tells me a lot about the player base. The player base doesn't know how to deal with an Atraxa, which it's so easy to deal with her. It's just the fact that you don't want to break from the mold or the meta to do it. And
we just talked about 2 mana premium removal.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Like, there are tons of ways to do it. Now, this is a little off topic, but I'm just gonna say this and preface it because I want to talk about this on a different episode. But with you saying there's so much premium removal, I want to have an episode where we talk about why Oko should not have been banned. I'm just putting that there.
Okay, yeah, we'll do it. I'm down because
So
I don't think Oko should have been banned.
okay, dope. All right, so that was your number 3, right?
Correct. What's
Okay.
your number 3?
That's my. Oh, whoops! Let me go back up here. Let's see. Do I have it? Let me see. Where is it? It's here. I think it's a mythic. Maybe it's a rare. I can never. Ah, there it is. Breach, not Beacon.
Oh, Breach.
Breach is my
Breach.
number 3, and it's funny because
Okay.
like this card and the Atraxa and the Atali are all in the same deck.
Yeah. Okay. Tell me
I-
why. Why do you think
so-
this should be banned?
No, I don't think this should be banned. I don't like any of these cards. I don't think should be banned. These are just my top 5 cards from Standard. Like in my
Okay,
personal
okay,
top 5,
go
that's
ahead.
what this is.
Why
I
is
don't
this
think
on
it
your
should
list?
be banned, but it's on my list because it's so damn good. I mean, milling 10
Yeah.
cards and you choose a creature or planeswalker from that graveyard and put them onto the battlefield. Like it's just, where's the downside? Because especially if you're playing Reanimated with Atalia and Atraxa and you're playing other things to get from the graveyard, there is no downside. It's not on a scale of Invoke downside. It's not by any means. But this card is just really, really, really good. And this is usually like a
It is.
2 to 4 of in those Atali decks. So sometimes
Yeah.
when I brain somebody, it's difficult. I'm like, I look at their hand and they have a Atraxa, Atali, and a Breach in hand, and I'm like, oh Jesus Christ, what am I doing? I'm not gonna
Yep.
lie. There's been a couple times where I see that in the hand, and I see some sort of reanimation after that or something like that. I'm like, you know what? Let's go to the next game. Like, even as a control player, I know when I can't do any more about that. I don't have as much removal about that. And the thing about these cards is they cost so much, but now we're in a format that if you can handle the first 4 to 5 turns and survive, and most of your deck are 6 and 7 drops, you could almost just win at that point because the bombs
Yeah.
that you're going to be playing are just going to devastate. They're going to devastate the board and your opponent, and mostly because Atraxa will draw you all the cards you need. Itali will put things on the battlefield that you would want on there that you had your opponent mill, and then Breach will grab the planeswalkers that it needs as well. So I'm not saying that
Yeah.
deck is a problem by any means, but it is very, very good deck. That is probably the most difficult deck I'm having trouble with. Is that deck right
Yeah,
there
I agree.
because on turn 4 they're playing Invasion of Zendikar, which puts them to turn 6. So by the time they're on turn 5, they're at turn 7. They play Breach on turn 5.
Yep.
So I mean,
Yeah.
even as a control player, I have to stop the battle for Zendikar. But in doing that, now there's something else that I probably should have stopped on their turn 5. So that's the most difficult thing, and that's what I'm saying about this deck and this card Breach is that essentially Breach is look at 10 cards from your deck and your opponent's, choose a planeswalker or creature from both of them and put them on the battlefield. That's what that card says.
Yeah. No, you're right. And Breach is a great card. Don't get me wrong. I don't think it's unbalanced. I think
No.
it's a fair card, just like
Sure.
we talked about with Atraxa. The only thing that I think could make this card more fair or more balanced is if it said choose target planeswalker or creature card from a player's graveyard. And the reason I say that is because
respond to it?
correct. Yes. Because there is literally no way for your opponent to stop you from grabbing one of the 10 cards off the top of their library. And that sounds kind of messed up, right? But when it comes to Magic, I think cards should be more ambiguous. And when I mean ambiguous, I mean like when we were talking about Invoke Despair and I said target opponent may sacrifice.
Sure.
Right? So in this card, I think it should say choose a target creature or planeswalker card in that player's graveyard, right?
Yeah.
And this card doesn't even target just the top 10 that you milled. It's any of the cards that are sitting in their graveyard, including the top 10. So if it said target, I think that would be a little bit more fair because then your opponent would have an opportunity to do something about it. Now, that being said, I don't think breach is a unbalanced or unfair card.
No.
And most of the time, breach the multiverse decks are built around your opponent playing cards from their library, right? So they're playing Atraxas and Atalis that just cascade into each other. But
Correct.
sometimes they get a Titan of Industry or something else busted from your deck, or your own Atraxa in your case, right? You're like, oh my god, they got my Atraxa, right? Like, it happens.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think this card is balanced and fair, but I think that it could be a little more ambiguous so that your opponent has an opportunity to stop you from breaking the game, breaking that matchup. And in my opinion, any time that a card can be answered in some way or another, whether you play an answer or not, if it can be answered, it makes it a better card. Yeah. Because it feels more magic-y.
That makes sense. I was just looking on my phone right now to see if choose and target kind of had the same connotation or meaning in Magic, and it does not. Because
they do not.
farted. Yeah, I was going to ask you, but I didn't want to interrupt you at the same time. But I just couldn't remember if choose and target had the same connotation in this game, but they do not.
Nope.
Now, I think that with breach, it doesn't, like, yeah, it scares me when they play it. I'm like, oh crap, what are they gonna get? Yeah. But at the same time, I'm not like, oh man, dude, like, screw this card. Like, I don't have those feelings like that like I do with Invoke. I don't have that feeling with any card in Standard anymore. It was just with Invoke because of how broken that was. So, like, when I see cards like this, it's fair. It's 7 mana. It's a sorcery. If it was instant, dude, screw that. That would be broken.
Yep.
That would.
It's a 7 mana sorcery. Mm-hmm. And I do, depending on what I'm playing, have the opportunity to deal with it.
Correct, exactly. And as of right now, there's no way to cheat breach into play, so they have to tap out for it. So knowing that information, I feel comfortable with it.
Yeah, I agree.
Because they don't have Fable to get the treasures, and this deck isn't worried about treasures. It's just I'm gonna play this bomb on turn 7, 8, 9, and 10. Can you answer it? No. Well, good luck with what happens after that, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Because between turns 1 to turn 7, you're either winning the game if you're aggro, or you're establishing a board state if you're mid-range, or you're controlling the game for the end game so you can win. Now, one thing I've noticed playing against this deck as a control player is this deck feels like I'm playing against another control deck because their graveyard is now their other hand, and they have a lot more threats than I do as a control player. And so I think that's the most difficult part when I play against this deck. So when I go into sideboard, I put in my Disdainful Strokes, I put in my Negates, I put in my Brains, and then I haven't put in my Pithing Needle because I don't feel a need to, because if they put an Atali on board, I could Pithing Needle the Atali, but at the same time, I should be able to delete Atali. If I can't, I deserve to die for flips.
And I mean, like you said, it does. Any breach deck is probably playing a couple of Atalis and the Atraxas, and that very much feels like a control deck because they're, like you said, getting an extra hand out of the graveyard. But those cards are gaining them card advantage, whether it's permanents on the battlefield or like Atraxa, when we talked about a minute ago, is just ripping you 4 to 8 cards. So it's feels a lot more like a control deck, and you should be able to answer that at the end of the day. Because, like you said, Breach the Multiverse, they're probably playing it on turn 7, 8, or 9, at which point you should be able to either negate it or board wipe on your next turn with a Sunfall or a Depopulate or White Sun Zenith, something like that, right? Like, you could probably deal with it. Yeah. So, I don't feel this card is broken. Or an Ossification, there you go. So, while this card didn't make my list, it is a very good card, and I think it's up there, but I don't think it's one of the top Standard cards, and that's my personal opinion.
Yeah, sure. No, that's fine. I mean, that's why we have that's why we have 2 opinions on here.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why we're here. So let's roll into number 2. You want to roll into number 2?
Yeah.
All right, so let's roll into number 2. Oliver Pimpin's number 2 top 5 card of Standard meta. the Wandering Emperor. There she is. That's my
There she
girl right
blows.
there. There she blows. Yeah, you better play the pretty one. There you go. All right. Yeah. All right. So the Wandering Emperor. So here's the deal with the Wandering Emperor. This is basically an instant speed removal. And here's she's multifaceted, right? I love her. So you attack in with 8 or 10 on the board, right? And then I remove 2, gain 2. So I basically negated 2 of your damage, right? But you weren't able to attack her as a target when you declared attackers, right? So I get to hold her. Unless you have an instant speed red or black removal spell, right? Like, I get to hold her, and now next turn I get to make a choice. Do I hold my blocker this turn and then plus it up and make your blocks and attacks bad next turn? Or do I go ahead and get rid of her and drop a 2/2, right? So, one of the reasons that the Wandering Emperor is still at the top of my list, she's number 2, is because she's so prolific in the meta. 3 out of the top 5 tier 1 decks are playing at least 2 copies of the Wandering Emperor. At least 2, if not 4, right? Actually, one of them's playing 3 copies, which is a pretty good number for an Azorius control deck, right? And when you look at a Planeswalker like the Wandering Emperor getting played in an Azorius control deck, that's a big deal because she's premium removal for that deck. Turn 4, 5, and 6 are the premium removal slots for an Azorius control deck. Yeah. This card is seeing play in 3 out of the top 5 or 6 decks in the Tier 1 meta right now. And that sounds really weird, but Tier 1 has 5 or 6 decks in it because they're overperforming. And she's in at least half of them. So she's a really good card. Now, what do we notice about this card? Oh my goodness, she's from the same set as all 3 of the recent bannings. So again, great set for standard, right? But I think this card is really balanced. So even though she has flash, even though she can remove a tap creature of any size, right? Whether it's your Atali, right? Or your Shieldred, or your stupid 2/2 token, whatever it is, even though she can remove any tapped creature, she sticks around. Yeah. Because you could not target her in your attack step.
Correct.
And as if you watch any content creators, if you watch any of the gameplay mechanics, people play around this card. They go, oh my goodness, you have 2 white and 2 more standing up, and you probably are playing a Wandering Emperor. I don't want to attack into that, so I'm going to hold back my 4 damage Shieldred. That's a big deal. Yeah. That matters. That makes a difference in the long run of the game. And here's the other great thing about the Wandering Emperor. Even if you don't remove one of their cards, you can still play her at the end of their turn and get an extra creature. Now 100%. You have a creature and a Planeswalker.
100%.
Oh my goodness, That's a big deal. Yeah, that's a big deal, right? So she's at number 2 in my slot of the top 5 decks because she sees a lot of play and she's that good. This card, even all these months later, still holds about a 30% pack rare value.
Yeah. I think the best thing about her is what you said as the last thing. Even if you aren't using it as removal, she still comes in at the end of turn to create a creature. Like
and a Planeswalker.
Yeah, you're creating it, and this whole set is about 2-for-1s. That's what this whole Kamigawa set is all about. 100%, it's about 2-for-1s. And we're now seeing how detrimental that is to standard. To be honest, it's cool. I get it, but it's too much for the format. I think these type of cards that are 2-for-1s or sometimes 3-for-1s in the Fable, are meant for Pio and Modern. And other formats, but it's too much for standard. So when it comes to the Wandering Emperor, I love this card. And when it was when it was first spoiled, all I could think of was Control in Modern now has an instant speed removal if I need it. And that's where I was looking at. And I still play the crap out of Wandering Emperor. But for me, I hardly play against her. I hardly and last season I was what was I? I think I was like two ranks away from Mythic. So I was pretty high up there. I was playing against Mythic players in last season, and I hardly ever saw her being played against me, which I thought was very odd. So
Weird.
to hear you say that it's like in the top 3 is kind of crazy. But I know I
Yeah.
have played against the Azorius Control, and I have seen her in there for sure. Now, in my
Oh,
take,
yeah.
I think it's just because of the way I play Magic and I play Standard that I don't see this card as a threat. I don't keep my eye out open for it. It's not on my radar. But I'm not downplaying the playability of Wandering Emperor. I'm not downplaying the power this card has. I'm not downplaying the versatility this card has. This card is amazing, 100%.
Yeah.
But in mine, I didn't even think of her as my top 5 at all because I don't
Really?
no. When I play her, I usually sideboard her out because there are so many cards
Huh.
with vigilance in the format right now, creature-wise. I can't kill an
Okay.
Atraxa
Okay.
with it. You know what I mean? And then even if I have something else that I can't, like say if I'm playing Selesnya tokens, they play the protection spell, the 1 and an X, and gives it hexproof indestructible, or they play Tamiyo's whatever, or if I'm playing against
Yep.
Tempo to get rid of a Jin, and I play Wandering Emperor, they phase it out or they give it hex. Like the spot removal with Wandering Emperor
Sure.
for me personally
Yeah.
has dwindled down so much between so much protection, single target protection, and so many creatures actually having vigilance.
Yeah. Let's look at what is the most significant evergreen ability in Magic.
The Flash.
No. First Strike. First Strike is the most important evergreen ability in the game of Magic.
Uh-huh.
If you play her at Flash, you not only get a 1/1 counter, but that creature also gains First Strike. Because let's look at Glissa, right? First Strike and Death Touch.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's combine First Strike with Haste. That's a big deal. Let's combine First Strike with Menace. That's a big fucking deal, right? First Strike is the best offensive ability in the game. Now, some might say Double Strike. Sure. Okay, got it. But First Strike is, Double Strike is First Strike plus, right?
Right.
You get to hit again, right?
Yeah.
First Strike is the hardest thing to deal with. Whether you combine it with Menace or Death Touch or Haste, First Strike is a problem. Okay, she's not only a combat trick, she's a premium removal spell, and she's a creature generator. And now that Invoke Despair is out of the game, that makes a difference. Because before, the Wandering Emperor was a buffer against Invoke Despair. That's it. That's all she was. She sat in a deck so that you only lost 2 life and they only drew 1 card. Because you sacrificed your Samurai token and your Wandering Emperor to their Invoke Despair. They drew, and maybe you sacrificed your Wedding Announcement and now they drew 0 cards, but you still had to pay 4 mana to lose 3 permanents. And that felt bad, right?
Yeah.
She's an amazing card. She is my number 2 on the list, and she's seen play.
I'm not downplaying or saying you're wrong by any means, but not at all.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to come back to your First Strike, you're 100% correct. That's why she's an issue. Thalia.
Yeah, you're right.
The first strike on Thalia, you can't attack into her. She's a 2/1.
No.
But you can't attack into her when she's played on turn 2. You have to wait until almost turn 3, 4, or 5, because then you'll have a creature that can survive the first strike. That's one, I think personally that's one of the biggest things that's threatening to me is the first strike on Thalia. Sure, the tax of 1 sucks, but you already know that's already coming down. That's
I get around that.
It comes with it. But if you don't have removal, she's going to hit you for 2, and then hit you for 2, and then you put down a 2/2, she's going to kill that 2/2, and then hit you for 2, and then hit you for 2. Like, the first strike on there is just ridiculous. So, like, to go back
and
to
the Wandering Emperor turns it into a combat trick.
Yeah, and gives it a +1/+1 counter.
Yes! Turns it into a combat trick.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so no,
I even if you're not going to remove something, you're going to turn it into a combat trick removal.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. She's really, really good. And I just find it odd that I just don't see her. I don't know why. That's just so odd for me.
So what's your number 2?
So my number 2, you should probably know this one, is Leyline Binding.
Oh, okay.
This
All
card,
right, I got you.
I honestly believe that this card is highly, highly, highly underrated and underplayed. And you know me, I fit this in damn near any deck. I mean, because
Yeah.
our mana is so good, if I'm playing a 2-color deck, I'm going to throw in an extra set of Triomes just so I can get Domain off. Because of how good this card is. Because by turn 2, I can get rid of anything and everything I want for the rest of the game. Unless you Field of Ruin one of my Triomes. Like, and I could do that for 1 mana. Even if I put down 1 Triome, this now only costs 3. I mean, the versatility of Leyline Binding is so damn good, and throwing Flash onto it is kind of what breaks this card, and not in a way that needs to be banned because nobody's really playing it. I only see it in like
No, it's not ban worthy.
No, it's not by any means. What I only see it in very, very few niche decks. Like sometimes I play against it, you know. And surprisingly, I've only seen it in like 2 5-color decks. With as much 5-color decks that are running around, I've seen it like once or twice in a 5-color deck, in which I'm like, I don't know why you guys aren't just slotting 4 of these in. You should be. But anytime I make a deck, I see if I can just fit this in because of just how good it is. I play it in Pioneer, and I also play it in Modern. Like, it's essentially at instant speed for 1 white, remove non-land permanent. That's all it is. And it's not difficult, especially in Modern, when you got fetch lands and you can go fetch Triomes. Why wouldn't you play this? I don't get it, you know? Leyline Binding is my number 2. It's a personal favorite of mine, but it's also highly, highly underrated and underplayed. And honestly, I'm kind of glad it's underplayed, so I don't have to deal with it.
It is a problem.
When I deal with it or when I play against it, it feels bad when I have to when I see their Leyline Binding coming out and I have like an Atraxa, and they're like, okay, after I draw my cards in response, I'll Leyline Binding the Atraxa. I'm like, damn it. Now I have to Leyline Binding.
Yeah, but I usually have to binding a binding.
Exactly, yeah. And I'm just like, man, I don't want... That's like O-ringing an O-ring, you know? Remember those days?
Yes. Yep. That's what it feels like.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's like, that's what it's there for. On your opponent's side and your side.
Yeah.
So, Leyline Binding is my number 2 card for me, man. That card is just so damn good.
Nice. It is a great card. It is a great card. It did not make it onto my top 5 list.
Yeah,
but
it won't make it on
love
most.
That card.
It definitely wouldn't make it on most.
Nice.
So what's your number 1?
So here it is. What's your number 1? You give it to me, and then I'll tell you what mine is.
I have to give you mine first?
Yeah, absolutely. You got to feed it to me. Let's go.
Well, I know it's not on yours. I know that for sure.
Yeah, you think so?
I know so. All right, hold up.
I think you're so smart.
SMRT. I know for a fact this is not your
SMRT. Okay, let's go. Let's go. Oh my God, no, you didn't. Okay, all right, yeah, you're right. It's not on my list.
I know it's not on your list. Yeah, so since I'm here, I'll go through it. Invasion
let's do it.
Phyrexia is my number 1 card, which nobody is playing. It obviously, so this is more of a personal thing, but also I have, oh my God, I have preached about this card to you. I don't know how many times, and I have.
You have turned me on to this card. This card
is
bumped to the top because of you.
Good. This card is so it's the best battle in this set, 100%. And people aren't playing it for some reason. I don't understand. Maybe just because it's blue-white. I don't know. But I have won so many games because of this card. Being able to, on turn 4, I can put out 2/2/2 creatures just so I can have some block against aggro is great. On turn 5, I can have
with
3
vigilance
creatures, and they have vigilance. Yeah, like that's great.
Yes.
But once you get into turn 7 and 8, you're putting out like 6 to 8 to 9 2/2 vigilant knights.
Yes.
And this meta right
We
now
could talk
is
about this card ad nauseum for a whole
yeah.
episode. Like, this card is good, and nobody's playing it.
No, absolutely no one is playing it. And the fact that we're in a meta where I'd say 80 to 90% of the meta is not playing board wipes, with the exception of what just recently happened with Azorius Control is playing board wipes, but that's just as of recent because of bannings.
Yes.
But
Yes,
otherwise,
bannings.
nobody is playing board wipes. They're all playing spot removal. And if I drop 7/2/2 knights, go ahead. Like go ahead
Yeah.
and go for the throat as many as you want, and then go ahead and cut down
But
as many
here's
as
the
you want.
deal. If you drop 7/2/2 knights, they have to board wipe. They have
That's
to
the
do something
only
about
thing.
that.
That's the only thing they can do.
Yeah. And if they're not playing like drag to the bottom in a black deck,
Yep.
or they're not playing white with the 3 premium removal board wipes in that deck, they're screwed. They're hosed. They're put off. And then you and I have talked about this a lot of times. Like, the number one thing you do the next turn is attack the battle. Like, you go for the battle. If you drop 6 or 7 of those dudes, you just flip the battle, because once it turns into Teferi, it's over, because you just get emblems. And then the second one you play, and then the third one you play, and then the fourth one you play are just because it has to do with when they uploaded the rules changes about double-faced cards.
That's how I do
Have Goblin grenade you to the face.
I fucking die. All of a sudden, the AI got real smart.
SMRT. There you go. All right,
Okay.
that's what you need to capture right there.
Yeah.
All right, so pick that up. Yeah, so there it is.
Okay. All right, now we're back. We had to do some cuts because, as Paul was explaining, they did a rule change. What you said, like in April, and
yeah, back in April they did a rule change for the copies, like the clone effects on dual face cards. So like you can copy a Polychronos and it can transform. The token can transform. But when you copy like a Praetor or a Battle or anything that would be exiled, right? Like the token is exiled, it'll never come back. You can't see it. So when they uploaded the algorithm to Arena, it makes it so that you can't see the other side of the card. And it tells you that it's not correct. So a Brattle or a Praetor like Elishnorn or Shieldred, when you go to look it up in your deck building, you can't see the other side of the card because it says, oh, this is not a dual-face card. Well, technically a dual-face card, but copy effects don't transform it.
So hence why we're here now, and we had to get into a bot game just so I could flip the Teferi so we can finish discussing this card. So
to continue our discussion, when you play 2, 3, or 4 of those
or 6 or 7
those
or 8.
or 6 or 7 or 8 of those 2/2 white knights with vigilance, you immediately attack into the battle, right?
Correct.
Because you want to get Teferi on the board. And playing your deck with great success, you want to get that emblem, because the next time you play an invasion, whether it's the second or third or even the fourth one, you've got dudes that are 3/2, 4/2, 5/2 in power, and if they don't have a board wipe, if they don't have a Sunfall or a Depopulate or a White Sun Zenith, right?
Dead.
Like, and those are all white cards, they're going to die. Like, you're just going to punch them in the face, and even just one of those emblems off of Arena are a big deal.
Now, the thing about this emblem that makes it so good is it stacks.
Yeah, and so it does stack. So,
so the good thing about it is that it does stack, and so the ward just keeps getting higher and higher and higher for the spot removal. So not only are your creatures getting buffed, the ward is getting higher as well.
Correct. And so, you've got a 4 loyalty Teferi right now. If they don't attack Teferi, I may just pop him again and let him die, because now all of my knights have +2/+0 and ward 2.
Yeah,
right?
I've done that so many times.
Yep.
The other thing I do with this card. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, let's not discount the draw effect. It's
Oh,
draw two cards.
Before we get to that, hold on. So the other thing I do when it comes to the -2 is when he comes out on the field after I attack and comes, I'm -2, so he's at 2 loyalty. Excuse me.
Yep.
If he survives, I usually have a second invasion in my hand. So I will -2 kill him, play the second invasion, and I have to now attack with 2 less, or excuse me, with less creatures to make that battle flip again. And so now I can send, if I have like 4 of them out, I can send 2 at the battle, or 3 at the battle if they have 1 blocker, just so I can guarantee I get the flip, and then 1 at the face.
Yeah.
And then now he flips again,
Absolutely.
I -2 again, and boom, all of a sudden I have 3 emblems. And from now on, since I have 2 more in the deck, these 2/2 knights are now 5/2 knights immediately. And not only that,
well, while they're dealing with all of your knights, you're drawing cards to get to the next invasion.
Correct, yes. And not only that, one of the best parts about this deck, and I don't want to go into the details of the deck, but since we're playing Devious Cover-Up, we just grab them back from the graveyard and put them back in our deck.
Yeah.
And so
absolutely.
we just replay them again. So yeah, that -2 is really, really good. But go ahead and with the +1, because I'll talk about the -3.
Yeah, so let's not discount that +1, right? Because sometimes, the first turn he flips, you're going to get the emblem, right? Like that's what you want to do. You're trying to get to the emblem for your knights. But let's say he survives into the next turn. You're like, oh, okay, but you're sitting on 2 or 3 cards. Drawing 2 cards is not a bad deal because you're basically filtering your hand. Draw 2, discard 1.
Well, you
right?
discard 2.
So, well, unless you discard a creature card. Now, if you're playing a control deck, if you're playing a control deck, you're going to probably discard 2 cards unless, theoretically, and I've done this because I played your deck, you discard an Atraxa. Now, why would you discard an Atraxa, you say? Well, because I already have the game in hand. It's clinch. I'm holding a Devious Cover-Up. I've got the Disdainful Stroke. I've got the Memory Deluge that's going to replace 2 of those cards anyway.
Exactly.
Right? Or I'm like, I'm going to hold that Atraxa. I'm going to discard the 2 worst cards in my hand because I've got 2 basic lands that I don't even need because I'm sitting on 7, 8, 9 lands anyway. So let's not discount the fact that he effectively filters 2 cards into your hand.
100%.
That's a big deal.
Yeah. And that's the thing is, like, I think a lot of decks that are already playing a bunch of creatures aren't playing this because they don't see the value in it as much as, like, tapping out for X, and so they won't play it. And I don't know why the Azorius control deck isn't playing this card as a 4 of. I have no idea why it's not, because what are the creatures that are played in that deck? I don't even know what
if you're playing hardcore, 0. And I don't know why they're not either, because it's a game closer, just like Mirix, or just like White Sun Zenith.
Mirix. And I think it's a better one than White Sun, honestly, because Mirix, you have to have 3 or 4 mana for it. 3, right? Or is it 4?
3 and tap it. Well, it's so 4 total because
correct.
3 and tap it.
Yeah. So for 4 mana, I can create one creature that can't block, or for 4 mana, I can create 2 2/2 knights that have vigilance and can block.
Yes.
And it gets me a battle on the field. Or if I play the White Sun, I could blow up the entire board and get all those 1/1s. Again, they can't block, but it's just like pinging them for 1. So I think White Sun is better than the Mirix, but Invasion is better than both, to be honest, if you're in those colors. Now, the -3 is something that I don't see anybody play this card, to be honest. I've probably come across like 2 decks that play this card, but they don't play it to the effect that I have because I've been playing this card since it came out, and I know the ups and downs to this card. So this -3 is definitely not respected. When I play against an opponent and I'm -3, they read the card. You can see them highlighting Teferi, and you can see them highlighting my creatures and everything because they're not respecting the -3. That -3 is game changing. If they have a shielded on board and you did X for 6, you -3, tap 4 of your vigilance knights, and you still have 2 blockers, and you shuffle that shielded back into their deck. Or if this is late game, and you have 9 knights on the field, because you can do that, you tap 7 of them, and you shuffle the Atali back into their deck, or the Atraxa back into their deck. Or you can shuffle their Leyline Binding and get back your Atraxa, because it's a non-land permanent. Like, the value of this -3 and the fact that you just crap out a ton of 2/2s is really game changing in the match, and I do it so many
Agreed.
times. I have never flipped a battle so much than I have Teferi. And in the beginning, when I first started playing him, I couldn't figure out how to do it correctly. Now, almost every single game that I play Invasion, Teferi flips at least once, maybe even twice.
Oh
Because
yeah.
I've figured out how to do
absolutely.
it properly and how to control the board state so I can make sure that he flips. And the thing about it is, even if he doesn't flip, you still have all these 2/2 knights on the field that they have to figure out what to do with. Because you can chump block for days and kill their creatures, and then you play another invasion the next turn for even more.
Or
like
don't block, and then they don't have a blocker.
Yeah, that too. So this is my number one card. Obviously, you know it's a personal favorite of mine, but I just think that there's so much this card that nobody is playing and giving it its respect. Like, this card is so damn good, and there's a part of me that's like, I'm glad people aren't, because I don't have to deal with it.
Yeah, because it's a pain.
Yeah, it sucks to have to deal with this.
Yeah.
But like I said, the people that I have played against that play this, they don't play it correctly. They immediately try to get like two 2/2s on the board when there's nothing on the board. There's no threat. It's like, you need to just save it. Save it for when you do need it.
Yes, I agree. You save it for the mid to late game.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So that's my number one right there.
See you again soon, Planeswalker.
100%.
Okay. Well, you want to go into my number one?
Yeah. Let me get to the collection part again. Yeah.
All right. You ready?
Well, let me see. What can I guess? I don't think it'd be a Tali. Let me see. Oh, is it this? Sunwell? Or what's it called?
Sunfall?
Sunfall.
No, that's not my number one, but if you want to talk about it for 12 seconds, one of the best removal spells that's ever been printed.
I don't agree with that. But I see where people say that. I don't, no. I really don't. Okay,
Exile all creatures.
Sure. I'm not...
It's better than Shipwreck.
It's better than what?
Settle the Wreckage.
Oh, Settle the Wreckage.
It's better than Settle the Wreckage. Yeah. It's way better.
I don't think so. No, I think Settle the Wreckage is far better than this. Because
I disagree.
So you got to look at the fact that, like, the downside to Settle, obviously, is they get lands, right? That's the downside 100% to Settle.
No, the downside to Settle the Wreckage is it only exiles attacking creatures. So if they're playing around it, they get to keep their best one, and then you're like, oh my god, okay, I'll get rid of all the others.
Yeah, but if you're only playing Settle the Wreckage, you can't get rid of the ones that they're not using to attack with. You're not playing your deck correctly, I would say.
Okay, fair.
You know, because
Sunfall is one of the best exile removal spells ever fucking printed.
Now,
period.
If it's one of the best, yes, I would definitely agree with you. I'd say it's better than Fumigate, because Fumigate is really freaking good for a 5-drop because you gain so much life.
Yeah.
But if you're playing a control deck, you don't have too many creatures, so Fumigate's not going to do as much for you. But Sunfall will definitely exile the creatures so they don't come back for reanimator purposes or whatever.
And it gets around indestructible and hexproof and all of this other stuff.
Exactly. Yeah,
it's good. It's good, but it's not my number one. It's not my number one. Yeah, it's a good spell.
I'm glad you're cutting me off, because we were about to go into a whole tangent right there.
Yeah, there's a rabbit hole right there that we could have just gone back and forth on.
All right, go ahead.
Sheoldred, the Apocalypse.
Really?
Yes. So this is my number one standard card. Let me tell you why. So number one, if we just look at this card objectively, it's underrate. And what I mean is you're paying 4 mana for a 4/5. So it has a 5 butt, which means you typically have to use at least 2 spells to get rid of it. Unless you're playing one of my top 5 cards at the number 5 slot, which is a premium removal spell. So, she can be dealt with. However, Sheoldred the Apocalypse is seeing play in 3 or 4 of the top 5 or 6 meta decks right now.
Yeah.
In 4 ofs. Like, we're talking like Stompy Giant level of play. Like, she's just getting played in all of the top 5 decks. And the advantage that you get from playing Sheoldred, if they can't remove her, is insane. Every time they draw a card, they lose life. Every time you draw a card, you gain life. And she can be played in mono black, Orzhov control. She can get played in Esper. She's getting played as a 4 of an Esper control, which is one of the top 3 meta decks right now. You name it. Like Black X is what we're talking about right now, right?
Sure.
Like every single deck that's playing black is playing like 4 of this girl. She is the number 1 card in standard meta right now. That may change when we see, Eldraine and friends show up again. Or it might not. It might. Right now, what's happening in the meta is every single deck is Sheoldred and friends. The top 3 decks in the tier 1 meta right now is Sheoldred and friends. So anything and everything that gets printed, people sit down and go, okay, does this play with Sheoldred? Yep. Yeah. No, can I throw this in with Sheoldred? That's what we're looking at. That's why a pack rare comes out at $60, because she's that good. She's not only underrated, but her value is great. And go ahead and remove her. I'm going to play another one, because there's 4 copies in my deck.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see how this is like one of the most played cards in Standard. And for me personally, I realized that when was it? I think it was when was Mono Black like really prevalent? Was it right when Dominaria came out?
Yes, when Sheoldred dropped, when they combined Sheoldred with Invoke Despair, that's when it was the best.
I think that's when she was the scariest for me, is during that time. Now, once Kamigawa came out, she was still pretty scary. There's a point where, again, this is personally for me. Is it Phyrexia? No. I think when March came out,
Yeah, your mom came out.
When Mom came out, Sheoldred went off my radar. She was no longer a threat to me. Yeah. And so that's why I didn't think about her in your top 5 or in mine, because she's just not on my radar anymore. And that's not downplaying her. Again, that's the same things that I'm saying with Wandering Emperor is the same thing here. I am not downplaying anything you're saying by any means. She is a hell of a good card. And do I think she needs to be banned? I don't think so. Restricted, maybe we could try that on her. You don't think so for the restricted either?
I don't even think for the like restricted.
I think maybe a 2
of
her.
I don't think so.
Only for the fact that she costs only 4. If she costs 5, I would not see the problem at all of restricting or banning her whatsoever. The fact that she does cost 4 is the only gripe, and that's just a very lighthearted gripe that I would say about her.
Sure.
And I have to admit, like, when I'm low on life as a control player, because your life is a resource as a control player, and if you know how to use it right, you can win with it. But the times when I'm at like 6 life, that's when I fear Sheoldred, to be honest.
Yeah.
That's when I fear her.
Like, that's when you want to be playing her anyway, right? Is like when you've already got them down to 10 or less life.
Yeah, like if you're a good, smart player, that's when you want to just throw her down, save them all until the end, so that if they are removing them or board wiping, you have them all ready to go again to finish the game. That's how she should be played. But the majority of players throw her down as soon as possible. So I think that the most players play her as a 4-drop on turn 4, and then you kill her, and then they play her on turn 5. And then I think you're wasting it at that point, wasting the power of Sheoldred. Because like you said, she's a game closer. Like, she can be your game closer. Yeah, she's an early threat, and she can start ticking you down, but you shouldn't just throw her out just because you can sometimes, But maybe I'm wrong in that type of thinking. But it's the only reason I say that I wouldn't, like, if they did a restricted on her, it'd be because of the 4 cost. But if they banned her, I don't think she's ban-worthy. Not anymore, at least.
Yeah.
And it's because, like, a lot of the pieces that made that Mono Black so damn good, that made her so powerful, is not really there anymore.
Well, I don't think she was ever ban worthy. Again, because we have a lot of premium removal and because she can be dealt with during the upkeep. I think that's a really important distinction. She can be
Oh yeah,
dealt with during your own upkeep. And
correct.
that makes a big difference. I don't think she's ever been ban worthy, but when we look at the tier 1 decks, we're talking about Dimir Midrange, Esper Legends, Mono Black. Like Mono Black is right up there in the top of the lists, right?
Yeah,
And they're playing 4 copies. Every one of those decks, even Orzhov mid-range is throwing her in there just because she does damage.
yeah,
And that's a big deal. And so I think in the meta right now, this is my number 1 card. If you're not playing Black X, you're not taking advantage of the most efficient cards. She's so efficient because
yeah.
she comes down as a 4/5 for 4, and she starts dealing your opponent damage and gaining you life. That's a big deal. And if
It
you're
is.
already playing a deck, like I think you should be, if you're already playing a deck with card advantage,
Hmm.
this does all the work for you. This is the backbone, the crux, and
Yeah,
it's a must answer threat. That's the thing. You have to answer Shieldred every time she comes down on the battlefield, or 1, 2, or 3 turns is going to cost you the game.
yeah. No, I can agree with that. And this can segue into our last topic, um, which is to have it on our notes is here. Brewing versus net decking. So we can finish off with this if you're cool with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
um, so this kind of like leads off into it's a perfect segue. So you mentioned that, I mean, if you have the cards to support her to where she can support you, play her. And I totally
Yeah.
agree. But in the deck that I built and you've played it, do you think she fits in that deck?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I think
Now,
you can get away with a couple copies of her.
and that's what I was thinking too, just a 2 of. You know, she can't fit
Yep.
as a 4 of in that deck, to be honest. Now there's a different deck that I've created that I don't think you've seen, which is the no stop. I said no. That deck. That's my
Yeah.
main deck now. So I'll show you that one in a second, and which is completely different
Okay.
from the 5 color one that you've been playing. But anyway, I am trying to get out of this mindset, and this comes down to a brewer and a net deck. And we've had these discussions numerous times. You and I are brewers, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way by any means, but you net deck and then change, what you feel works for you and what you like to play. Or sometimes if it's a
Yeah.
high level tournament,
Fair.
you'll grab the deck and pilot it well. And I respect that,
Yeah.
But I know where you came from. That's why I'm okay with the way you net deck. Most people who just
Yeah.
jump into Magic, they just go for the top deck or the top 3 decks, and that's what I'm going to play. But they don't know the road that it took to be a brewer, that and what it takes to
Yeah.
make these kinds of decks. And I got to give it to me, you, and Henry that we are brewers
Yeah.
at heart, you know.
Absolutely.
And out of the 3 of us, I think Henry is the most that is definitely against net decking, and then I am in a close second.
Yep. Correct.
And
Yeah.
so,
So
and oh, sorry, so I can finish what I was saying. My bad. So when I see this card, and this is the thing I'm trying to get myself out of, is I don't want to play it because everybody else is playing it. That's why it's not in the deck. That's why I didn't put it in there. That's why I never played Invoke Despair. That's why I never played Fable the
yeah.
Mirror Breaker. That's why I never played Bankbuster, because it was everywhere. And I always want to
Yeah.
separate myself from the pack, especially as a brewer. But it's exactly like you said. The value of her is just too good, and I just need to like figure out and put 2 in there. You know?
Yeah. Well, here's what I'll say, right? So fundamentally, when we're talking about brewers versus net decks, right?
Hmm.
Uh, my core belief on that is both are great. They both have value. Here's why. Some people are strong brewers, and they're good at it, right?
Yeah.
Some people are weak brewers, but great players. And so I
Pilots.
tend to
Yeah.
put myself in that category. So, like, I consider you and Henry really good brewers, right?
Mhm.
You're also both decent to great players, but I'm not a great brewer. I'm not real good at it. I'm not good at looking at a card from an objective value standpoint and going, this is a good card. I'm going to brew it into a deck. I'm going to play it with some of this other stuff, right?
Yeah.
But here's the deal. At the end of the day, and there was a content creator, I can't remember who it was a while back, that kind of said, listen, when we're talking about brewers versus net decks are already the most efficient versions of the meta that you can achieve.
Correct.
You can brew all day long, and you'll never find a more efficient meta because in the 21st century, we have instant access, immediate access to all of the results from Star City Games or MTG Arena's challenges or whatever it is. Those players have already found the most efficient way to play all of the available cards. Now, here's the deal. Every single net deck started as a brew.
Correct.
Some player, better than me, probably better than you, started it as a brew and then did something with it. They won a tournament or they won a world championship or they won an RCQ and turned it into a net deck that everybody's playing.
Yeah.
Right? So I don't really dog the net decks because originally it was a brew by somebody who's better at brewing than me.
Sure.
Here's the fundamental difference. A great net deck is only great in the hands of a great pilot.
Correct. Yeah.
And when I think about it, I think about the Turing machine. And you and I have talked about this before. I've shared the article with you that Cambridge University did about Magic being the most complicated game ever created by mankind. Right?
Mm-hmm.
You can give the best meta deck in the format, any format, to a brand new player or a moderate player or a better than average or great player, and it will play at that level.
Yeah.
Because the value of any deck, whether it's a brew or a net deck, is really in the hands of the pilot.
Correct.
So that's why when you brew a deck, I struggle with it. Because you're a better pilot with that deck than I am. But when I pull a deck, as you mentioned before, when I pull a deck and I research different versions of the deck, I'm like, well, that plays a lot like I want, or I feel better playing it this way. It's because I can pilot it that way.
Yeah.
I'm never going to be a Jim Davis. I'm never going to be a CGB. I'm never going to attain that level of pilotry. I gobble up their content to get better. But you can hand them a net deck they've never seen. They'll flip through it right quick, and they'll go, I know how to pilot this deck.
Yeah.
Right? So I don't ever dog net deckers anymore. And I don't dog brewers either, because brewers, like you said, are trying to set themselves apart from the pack. They're trying to do something unique and different. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it does really well. Like the deck that you posted a few weeks ago, you had an 85.5% win rate.
Yeah.
Well, that wasn't because it was like an amazing deck. It was because you were the pilot. Because I took that same deck and I struggled with it, right? Like I was hurting and I was texting you about it. I was like, hey man, like what are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. And you're like, oh, well, X, Y, and Z. I'm like, oh, well, okay, yeah. Because you brewed it, you knew how to pilot that deck and make choices, right? So whether it's a brew or a net deck, it's really about who's holding it in their hands and who can forecast those plays, who can know what to do with their draws. And we've talked about it a few times. We have some friends that, would otherwise have good decks that they're really slow to make decisions with. Well, a great player has already played the chess game in their head and knows what to do on each turn, and they're faster and quicker and they know what to do because they're a great fucking player, right? Well, I'm not going to dog either one of those two groups. I take net decks, I tweak them, I make changes. Sometimes, like the RCQ, I just decided I'm not going to play any 1-drops. I'm just going to play 2-drops because it's more consistent across game 3, right?
Yeah, which totally made sense.
Right. Well, that's just me. It's not the net deck, but it's 90% of the net deck.
Sure.
Right? And then some people are like, you're going to play true brews. I call them true brews. Like, totally out of the meta. You made this up, you played it, you tested it, and you piloted it to success. And that's great. But at the end of the day, we got to remember that every single net deck on the planet was originally a brew.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with that. When you think of net decks, it's exactly that. Is like it started somewhere. That's the beginning of where the deck came from. And like you said, we live in a time of the technology and fast information that the formats are min-maxed weeks prior to the set releasing. And that I think that's why I'm a little I'm a little judgmental about it and a little I don't want to use the word upset, but frustrated when it comes to net decking is because I'm so excited when a new set comes out, but I can't play it early as all the other streamers do, like 2 weeks in advance, and then the meta is already established 2 weeks before the set even comes out. So now I feel like as a brewer, I'm playing catch up because I'm now 2 weeks behind because everybody is either playing mono red aggro as every new set comes out. That's what they do, which that sucks, but I respect it. And then they're either doing that or there's already like 2 to 3 decks that have been established and min-maxed that's what everybody's playing already, and then they just take off from there. And so now I'm having to play catch up. And I think that frustrates me because we live in a more technologically versed meta now. That with Arena, the access to it is instantaneous, and with streamers having access 2 weeks in advance before the set comes out, that means everything is being min-maxed, and then once the set drops, everybody just makes those decks, and there's just like not that excitement for the game. It's just like I just want to win, and I feel like that's the problem with EDH and Commander, is that's the mentality, and I just don't want to see that for Standard, and unfortunately it's going that route. And I think that is my whole mentality behind it. So when I, like here in Japan, like even when I was playing Standard and all I played against were Rakdos decks with Fable and Invokes and things like that, there was a part of me that was like, oh geez, here we go again. But then again, I was also confident because I was like, I built my deck for this, you know? So when I got Invoked Despaired, I didn't feel as bad because I did what I could. And sometimes you just get mana screwed or you get flooded. Like it happens. That's magic, you know? But when it's, I don't know, I guess like separating myself is I guess that's my ego for sure. And it's the only place I have an ego is in Magic. I'm not an egotistical person.
That's not true. That's not true.
Really? Like where else am I egotistical?
No, absolutely not. You are a good-looking, badass motherfucker walking the planet, and you fucking know it. No.
There's a difference between confidence and egotistical. There's a huge difference.
Oh, okay. All right.
I'm a confident
perception.
person. Yes,
perspective.
I'm a confident person.
Perspective.
Correct. But I'm not egotistical to where, like, I'm gonna like.
That's true. You are a generally humble human being.
That's That's what I meant. But when it comes to Magic, I do have an ego. I want my deck that I made to win, and when I beat you, in my head, I'm like, it's my deck that beat you, not somebody else's. But it was mine. You know.
So here's what I'll say. Like I've always been a very humble Magic player. Even when I'm playing land destruction, I always try to be humble about it, right? Because at the end of the day, what?
How do you be humble about land D? I'm curious.
Because when you hate Scoop, I say good game.
I hate when a land D person says good game. I just want to slap you.
Go ahead. Do it.
I'm like,
you're like one of 3 people on the planet that could actually slap me and I wouldn't know it. So, anyway, my point is, at the end of the day, right, it's just a game.
Sure.
It's a game, and we love it. We're passionate about it. That's why we're doing this podcast, right?
Yeah.
Like, we're sitting here taking time out of our lives, out of our day, away from all the other things that we have going on, because we love it, and it's fun. But here's the deal. We always talk about Magic. but we never talk about the gathering. For
Sure.
me, it's about hanging out with you, hanging out with my friends, getting together, throwing down some cardboard. And you know, some of the best Magic memories I have are like those tabletop commanders, or we go and we play an F&M, but then what we do after, right? Like we go to the Legion or we go to the bar or whatever it is, right?
Lamex, yeah,
Like,
during in between rounds, things like that.
oh yeah, rounds between rounds. We started
Yeah.
doing that again, right? Like that's where it's at. It's about the gathering. It's about getting
Yeah.
out with like-minded people and having fun. At the end of the day, it's a game. So whether you're a brewer or you're a net decker or you're very humble or you're very egotistical about your play, nobody cares. At the end of the day, it doesn't have an effect on
Yeah.
my life or your life or anybody else's lives, right? Like we walk away, we slap each other on the back, we laugh our asses off, and we have a good time because
Sure.
it's about hanging out with people like us. It's the gathering that matters. And no matter what WotC does, like, look, they're going to print cards to print money. And we're going to buy them because we're dumb. But at the end of the day, it's because we're buying them with our friends, you know, and we're trading and we're playing and we're having a good time and we're laughing and joking and running around and just doing silly stuff. And that's fine. That's what it's about. It's the gathering piece that matters to me because as a full-grown male adult nerd, I got to hang out with other full-grown male adult nerds so that I don't feel alone. Right?
Yeah.
And that's what it comes down to. That's what it's really about. So we can sit here and we can talk about metas, we can talk about cards and net decking and brewing and like all of the silliness that Watch is doing. But at the end of the day, as long as it's people like you and me sitting here having these conversations, having a good time, that's what matters. That's what truly makes me feel good about myself and the people I choose to be around.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And in the same on the same note that even if for some reason, which I don't see happening for another decade, if Magic dies and they're no longer printing cards, I should say if they're no longer printing cards and they shut the game down, Magic won't die. And that's what's kind of sets it apart from every other card game, is because there have been so many card games that have come to fruition and they've died and they've never been played again. Magic will never die. People will still play it because it's already been established for 3 decades. And sure, they won't print any more cards, but that doesn't mean all the formats don't exist. It's not like the formats go away. People will still, shops will still hold tournaments, internal tournaments.
Yeah.
You know, and maybe some other corporation will pick up the game and restart it again. You know what I mean? So like,
maybe
I think that Magic is here at the very least for another 10 years, and we'll see what happens after that because of, you know, how the corporation is running right now and things like that. So, yeah, no, I definitely agree on that part. In the end of it, it's just, you know, chilling with the homies and things like that. But
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, here, let me show you this deck real quick.
Yeah. This is the one you were talking about? No, that's not it.
No, so this is the one that you've been playing, right?
Yes.
Testing? Okay.
Yep.
So
show me the nope deck. Show me the nopes.
So this one is the new favorite. It's the new hotness.
Ooh, Hidetsuku and Kairi. Yeah. Okay.
This is Brainstorm on a stick. So why not?
Yeah. Okay. All right. I would drop 1 Essence Scatter for a Dissipate. And I would add a second Celestis.
Well, I have the Dissipate in here, but Dissipate hardly gets used. That's why I used to have 2 or 3 in here.
Because you're only running 1, Joker.
I know, because I used to have 2 or 3 in here. But the thing is, lower mana count counterspells have been a lot more viable. Because a lot more people are playing Make Disappear. So, and Negates.
Okay.
Make Disappear and Negates are some of the 2 most relevant counterspells being played right now.
Oh, you're right. Negate is underplayed, though. Negate is hella underplayed right now.
Yeah, but I'm starting to see it again a lot. So that's why, like, having a 3-drop Dissipate, I usually take this out in mid-game, to be honest. because then I add in another disable stroke or another negate.
Okay.
to
Or
replace it.
negate. Yeah, I can see
Yeah,
that.
you know?
Yeah.
But the Hidetsugu with the brainstorm ability, I don't care if they kill it
Yeah.
because usually
No.
I'll put a depopulate or a drag to the bottom on top, and then it gets cast and wipes their board
Cast
at
it for
instant speed.
free.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's always really good. Now I've also had to learn from my mistakes that do not put a memory deluge on top.
Correct.
So I had to learn from that.
Yeah, I
But
bet you
yeah,
did.
defabricate is in the main board because triggered
Oh, that
abilities
card
are
is so
still a
good.
thing.
You taught me the value of that card.
Dude,
And there have
people,
been a number of times
yeah,
where I'm like, man, I wish I was holding a defabricate.
yeah, like it's you pay one extra. It's stifle, but you pay one extra for the option of countering an artifact or enchantment spell, and then it gets
Yeah.
exiled. Like
Yeah.
nobody's playing
Shut
it.
down a
What's
wedding announcement.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then if they play an Atraxa, I'm like, no,
No.
you don't get to draw. And then
Oh, and
go
then
ahead
I'm
and
gonna
sack
remove
it.
it. Oh
Yeah.
no. Yeah, go ahead and sack that hoe.
Yeah. So, but yeah, this is the new upgraded version of that deck that I sent you, that I've been
I
playing.
need to play this.
This one is
Let me ask you a
more
question.
controlling than anything.
Why? So in all of these versions of the deck, why are you not playing Titan of Industry?
Because that's too much green, and it doesn't do enough for me.
But it's 7 mana for 2 green.
No, for 3 green.
Like, whatever. Like, you shouldn't have any problem playing it. What's
Well, the
going on
fact
here,
that
guy?
that Atraxa only needs 1 green is so much more better than
One
having
of
to worry about
each.
get 3.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Because
I
that's
see that.
like the only reason the is in here is for Atraxa,
Okay.
Leyline Binding, and Terra Sunder. That's it.
Okay. And they all require 1. That's
One.
fair. Okay.
So
I got you.
yeah.
Fair enough. Yep.
But figuring out where to put this in, I can try that. Actually, you know what? Let's just do this.
I wouldn't even do that.
Oh,
I
see,
would keep the 3-minute counters.
Have you noticed something? This is why I said
Hmm.
that card isn't on my radar anymore. What's missing in this deck? Can you tell? It was on your top 5.
No. Removal?
Mm-mm. It was your number 2, I believe.
Oh, the Wandering Emperor.
That's how much she's not on my radar anymore, dude. Isn't that fucking crazy? It's because there's so many protection spells with green that I play against.
Yeah,
and there's
yeah,
so
yeah,
many
yeah.
creatures with vigilance that's why she was not on my radar for top cards, and that's why I've actually removed her. She's not even in my sideboard.
Interesting.
But she is really, really good. But because
Yeah.
there's
Well, she's in 3 of the top 6 decks right now.
Yeah. No, I know. But I mean that I guess that's just like my train of thought. I don't know why I think that way, but that's that's how it is. Well, hey everybody, thanks for coming by. We'll have a name for this later.
All right, homie, it's good to talk to you. Be safe, have fun, as always.
All right, man.
Spread
Tell
love
fam I said what's
and be
up.
kind. Yep, sure will.
All right, man. Peace.
Out.